3000.
What is doing? My name's Maloney. This is the 3000 podcast. I'm joined today by an artist, illustrator, tattooist, Mark 563. Mark, thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
The 563, man. Tell us about the 563.
Yeah, it stems from my days as a graffiti writer, which is a long time ago now. I kind of gave up before I moved to Australia, but back in the day I used to paint. I was at university, art school, and I had bombed the entirety of the area where we were, and the faculty and whatnot with my mates. I used to write, and I used to write arrays, and I was in a crew called Full Contact, so it was EFC. I got into DJing, and at the university campus, they wanted a resident DJ, which I got an opportunity to get a gig as, and I couldn't use arrays as my name because I would have been expelled from university. I would have been kicked out. So EFC became 563.
There you go.
So that's that, yeah.
Man, well, already we're into some interesting stories.
Yeah, right.
So let's kick it off. Obviously, you're a proud Melburnian now, but we can tell from the early story and the accent that you didn't grow up here. You grew up in England. Whereabouts specifically did you grow up?
Yeah, so I grew up in a town that no one's ever heard of, but there's a place called Camberley. It's in Surrey, which is just outside of London. My parents moved there so that my dad could work in London. So it's specifically an area for London overspill for travel. So we're heavily influenced
like a
by
hub sort of.
Yeah, kind of like it's such a weird place because it's on the corner of three counties. So it's on the corner of Hampshire, Berkshire, and Surrey. But it might as well be sort of Greater London by that point. It's about a 25-minute drive into London.
Right.
But not London, not cool enough to be London. That's where I grew up, but I ended up moving to London after university.
Yeah. So let's talk about a young kid growing up there.
Yeah.
Can't remember what it's called.
Camberley.
Yeah. And so where do you sort of discover artistic sort of endeavours, or what comes first? The art, the hip hop culture. Where did you sort of find this stuff that you now know and love?
Look, I was always into art. My mum will recount stories of if she wanted 5 minutes peace, she would just chuck me in the pen with my dog that I grew up with, a sheet of paper and some crayons, and she knew I was always drawing. I was really into art, so that was definitely before music.
Yep.
Art, and I was into comics. So I kind of took my inspiration from a bunch of places. Then I got into hip hop just because it was there, and I'm of that age where I grew up with it around me.
Yep.
I remember hearing The Message by Grandmaster Flash and Melly Mel because I'm that old. And in England, there was an advert. They had a commercial on TV for the Green Cross Code, which was like road safety for kids, and they used they re-recorded a version of The Message to tell people don't step out if you're close to the edge.
Wow.
Lose your head. So that we already had this kind of hip hop. We were exposed to hip hop in the UK relatively early on. So that's going to be like 82, 83.
Yep.
We knew that Malcolm McLaren had brought hip hop to England. And then you had his music, and then we had breakdancing on the TV. It was a fad for a while, but we had access to the music, and so it was there. Then we had the graffiti stuff. So graffiti started to get big in the early mid 80s, and that's when I started sort of paying attention to it as someone who was really into art. Yep. I remember at school there was a kid who had spray can art book. So I never saw subway art back then. It was spray can art, and I had a skateboard deck that I swapped it for this book, which I still have the copy of the book now.
Amazing.
So it became my Bible.
Yeah.
And so I just trace and copy out everything from there long before I sort of endeavoured to become a graffiti writer myself. Yeah. But yeah, so it kind of towards the mid to tail end of the 80s, I had a cousin, or family friend who I referred to as a cousin. We were that close, who was a little bit older than me, and we'd go and hang out, and he'd make me tapes that would have LL Cool J and Run DMC on them. Yep. So that was really my exposure to hip hop outside of the old school sort of disco era.
Yeah. And where's he sourcing these sort of tracks from?
Well, so he's a little bit older than me, so he already had sort of a serious influence of music, I guess, from his peers and that.
Yep.
Like you go into the record shops, you go into the music chain stores that we had back there. Was HMV, but before then we had a place called R Price, which in the 80s, where you could buy hip hop records or hip hop tapes, and which would become hip hop CDs eventually. But it was there, so it wasn't hard to find some of it. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to go a little bit deeper, obviously you'd have to dig for it. Yeah. But we were really lucky. In England, we had the first proper hip hop magazine was in England. It was Hip Hop Connection. And that was in the mid-late 80s, and it was before The Source.
And you could get that from like the offies and stuff?
By the newsagents.
Yeah.
So like, I'm a huge magazine collector, and I still kind of pick up ones that I'm missing here and there. But my Hip Hop Connection magazine collection's pretty complete. I'm missing a few of the earlier issues, but for the most part, like, I had access to them and would buy them. And
say the ones that you're missing in case someone's watching.
I don't have the first issue, and I think I'm missing issue 1 and 2, maybe issue 4, but like I'm pretty good with it. Yeah,
and it's interesting at that time, like you said, the music and the culture is there. People are they're breaking. People are there's graffiti style art happening. Is there hip hop music being made there though?
Yeah, like. There is. At this point, I'm not entirely exposed to it, but
it's like pirate radio sort of stuff, or it's just being recorded.
No, there was a scene. There's the Covent Garden scene, which I wasn't a part of, but I have friends who were part of that.
It's just a little bit older than your.
Yeah. Yep. So when I sort of moved full time into the hip hop world and culture, I tended to be one of the younger ones within my crew. Most of my peers were up to 10 years older than me.
Wow.
So
how old are you talking? Like you're 13, 14 or something?
Yeah, look, I started listening to hip hop seriously at about the age of 11.
Yep.
And then it just overtook my life, and that's all I bought, and that's all I was interested in obsessively. By the time I'm 17 or 18 and I'm off to university, and then from university moving into London, breaking into the DJ world, everyone that I'm around is 5 to 10 years older than me. And it was great because I had peers to school me and sort of shape me and put me up on stuff that I'd missed. And there was always going to be stuff you missed because I'm suburban. I'm from a suburban area, so I don't have access to
And you've got to go to school, man.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. And at school, like I had a normal school experience, but I was deeply into hip hop. So we would go nightclubbing at the age of 16, 17 to sort of your high street nightclubs that were playing, I don't know, whatever pop dance music they were playing, but they'd also throw in the occasional hip hop record. So we'd be up there obsessively requesting Onyx Slam. Can you play Onyx Slam? Can you play, just anything really sort of quite deep that we knew they might have with them. Yep. And you'd hear it in a club night. And this is before we were going to hip hop clubs.
Yeah. So you're trying to get as much culture as you can where you can, because you're not really old enough to go out and sort of experience London sort of, I'm guessing, pretty underground sort of hip-hop scene.
Yeah, so that kind of has to come a little bit later because you have to have the access to get to London. And then if you're going to the clubs in London, you have to be able to get back home from them as well.
And is the age is 18 there?
Yeah.
Yep.
So, unlike Australia, we didn't really have many all ages sort of shows and things like that. So my first hip hop show I went to, I would have been 17. So that's 1994. And I went to see Cypress Hill, Funk Dubious, and Lords of the Underground.
Amazing.
At Brixton Academy. And it was amazing. And I was always very young looking. So a fake ID, can't grow a beard. I look about 12 and I'm queuing up nervously outside Brixton Academy, hoping I'm going to get in, and I got in and it was amazing. And the show was incredible.
That's early days for Cypress Hill as well. Like Black Sunday would have just come out.
Yeah. So they were touring their second album by that time. Funk Dubious were touring their first album, and Lords of the Underground were touring their first album as well. It was just kind of on that brink of the change of the crowd that you might see at a Cypress Hill show, because they've broken into the mainstream. So you're seeing more white people at that crowd, especially at somewhere like Brixton. Brixton's got a heavy, has long been very Afro-Caribbean. And so as a white kid going to Brixton, I was totally aware that I'm likely to stick out at a hip hop show. But something like Cypress Hill at that time was a little bit just beginning to cross over.
Yep, because they've had some commercial success at this stage.
Yeah, and well, they crossed over commercially, but also they were at that point considered what we would call a festival act, because we had Reading and Leeds, Glastonbury or whatever, like these festivals where people go for a weekend in there and they camp, and it's normally sort of rock bands or grunge bands, but then there were a few hip hop bands that crossed over.
Yeah.
Cypress Hill, House of Pain, Public Enemy, a few others.
And yeah, the same sort of thing happened here with Big Day Out. So you'd have your main sort of rock, for lack of a better term, but then they'd throw the token hip hop act in. Might be J5 or it's like
so this is a little bit before that kind of time, but that was the precursor to that, absolutely. So you would see, you know, maybe you were going to see Nirvana or someone along those lines, but Cypress Hill would be on the bill. Beastie Boys would be on the bill as well, because it's anyone who's kind of accessible to a alternative crossover crowd.
You had the alternatives, Rage Against the Machine, you sort of put him in that category too.
Yeah, and so like by that point we'd then start going to alternative nightclubs that would be playing rock, metal, punk, and then certain hip-hop songs would come in. So you'd hear some WuTang, you'd hear some Gravediggers, you might hear some Onyx, and you'll hear some Cypress Hill and House of Pain, and anything that, was just a little bit crossover.
Yeah. And then the more commercial stuff is still on the radio. Like I'm tipping that like sort of, Naughty by Nature and that sort of more commercial shit is on the radio. You are hearing that, but you're just not hearing the more underground shit?
Yeah, so, leading up to that, Naughty by Nature absolutely were on the radio. They were a pop band for all intents and purposes for people who didn't know hip hop. So, but they were fully hip hop. Yep. So, I remember there was a hip hop, there was a music magazine sort of aimed at the charts, sort of a top 40 magazine called Smash Hits.
Yeah, we had that here.
And it, it was.
You get your posters.
Yeah, but it had posters of boy bands or Kylie Minogue or whoever, but then it had Naughty by Nature in it, and they've had the lyrics to OPP in it because it was a chart success. And Smash Hits would then have a yearly televised live event where it was where people voted for favourite band of the year, favourite song of the year.
Like a showcase, award show.
It was like a poll winners party.
Yeah.
It was live, and Naughty by Nature performed on it live. And it was wildly, it was crazy to see, knowing that they were a credible hip-hop act as well. And I'm certain I remember watching that one episode where they were performing and someone on stage pulled out a spray can and tagged OPP or Naughty by Nature on stage, which was just completely unexpected. And so wow, you never see graffiti in a commercial or non-hip hop environment like that, I think.
Yeah. So it's starting to become a bit more mainstream. I think around about that time, like 94, I think like Snoop did the Grammys, and I remember being a kid and seeing that, and you're like, wow, this is something I've never seen on fucking TV.
Well, yes, Snoop was a really interesting one. So 93, Doggy Style comes out, and in England, at the time, to put it into perspective, he was on trial as an accessory to murder.
Murder was the case.
Yeah. So there was a situation where he'd got into a back and forth, and someone got killed. Someone got shot, and it was I believe it's his security killed someone, and he was being charged as the getaway driver in the murder. And so there's a case going on, but he was touring. His album comes out, and he toured.
That wouldn't happen anymore.
He toured the UK. Yeah, he wouldn't get a visa to do it.
No.
But there was the tabloid papers, which are absolute garbage, but there was the Daily Star, I believe, front page news, and it was a picture. It was his promotional photo as the front page with just the headline "Kick This Evil Bastard Out."
Fuck, really?
Yeah, you can look it up on Google. It's there. It's wild. So he came over and was touring. It's like, oh, he's a gangster rapper, charged with being charged for murder. He went on to late night TV show. We had a TV show there called The Word, which was like Friday night, 11 p.m. after pub viewing, sort of, and it would be the same sort of alternative acts that would play in the festivals, performing live in the studio, and then some interviews, and just it was a bit of.
But music focused.
There was music and acting focus.
Right. So kind of like a Letterman, but a bit more cooler.
Yeah, and they had some wild shit on it. Like you'd see a little bit of nudity. Great, everyone wants to see that at 11 o'clock when they're a teenager after the pub, whatever. But they had Snoop on there, and it was his first British interview, and he was being interviewed next to a children's TV presenter called Rod Hull. Now, Rod Hull famously was a very chaotic TV presenter who had a puppet of an emu. So it was Rod Hull and emu. And so he sits there with his puppet in his hands, he's operating the mouth, and he just attacks Snoop Dogg live in the interview, like grabs him by the face and jumps on top of him. It was insane. Again, look it up on YouTube. It's amazing. But this is kind of like...
And Snoop copped it.
Yeah. And like at the time, Snoop isn't the lovely Uncle Snoop that we now know.
He's young, yeah.
Snoop is a young, quite serious gangster rapper.
Hungry, yeah.
Yeah, and like, he's quite quiet. He looks a bit intimidating. He's not giving eye contact. Like there's something he's just very cool. And then this TV presenter Rod Hull just attacks him. It's brilliant. But that's the chaos of this show. The Word, it was amazing.
Yeah. So there is some hip hop stuff slipping into the mainstream, and you decide at this point that this is what you want to really take seriously. So then after school, do you move to uni where you can actually sort of consume more hip hop culture?
Yeah. So in England, university is generally quite similar to how it is in America, where you are likely to travel away from home and go and live in the town or the city where you're studying, quite often on campus. So it's kind of what you'd see in the teen American movies with the frat parties and all that shit. That's the kind of that is similar to that in the UK. You move away. So I moved away to art school, studying art. And
visual arts?
So first of all, I did a foundation course. In the foundation, you just do a year of doing a bit of everything.
Build your folio.
So you're deciding what you're going to specialise in your degree in. So you do a bit of fine art, a bit of photography, a bit of graphics, and everything in between, textiles, all that stuff, and figure out what you want to do. So I did my first year, my foundation, fully intent on studying fine art as a degree, but realised that there's absolutely no chance of making a career out of being a fine artist. It's just impossible. So at the last minute, I decide I could probably make a career out of graphic design. And this is a little bit of laziness. I probably should have pursued illustration, but illustration, my university was split into two campuses. The campus I was already on had graphic design, and I got preferred entry because I didn't have to really apply to get onto my course. As long as I completed my course, I was guaranteed entry into my degree. Whereas the illustration was on another campus that was in London actually. Right. And I was a little bit lazy.
London would have been cool for the hip hop thing.
Yeah, but my mind was like, oh, I already know this place. I've already got friends here. Like, this would be easy. I'll just do this. So I did the graphic design, and then I moved into halls of residence. So I moved on site, living on the campus for the first year, where I made some great connections on it from a hip hop perspective, but certainly from a graffiti perspective. Right. At this point now, I'm able to take graffiti a bit more seriously. Because I'm around other writers. Up until this point, like people I'd been around weren't as into hip hop as I was, or into the culture in any way as I was. So going to university as a 18, 19-year-old now, I'm finding people who are very much like me, and especially within an art world. So the graffiti, some of these guys were incredible. And so I started hanging out with people there, and we were writing. So it was cool. Like we'd go out painting. Yeah. I was never particularly good writer. I like bombing. I, for want of a better word, I enjoyed the chaos of causing destruction.
Yeah.
I loved seeing my tag up. I loved seeing and I was into character art. So Mode 2 was my idol for a long time. Like from the spray can art days, I loved the Mode 2 stuff. And I was into comics. So I was really into a comic called Tank Girl, which is Jamie Hewlett.
A movie, I
Yeah,
think,
it did become
eventually,
a movie. Yeah. So Jamie Hewlett, the illustrator of that, who actually went on to become the illustrator for the Gorillas.
Oh, yeah.
That was Tank Girl was his comics. I was really into that. So I was just drawn to kind of drawing characters. I loved sort of over letters. So I was far more focused on characters. So we'd go out painting at university and just run the tracks. Take a couple of cans with me, and the guys would just be bombing, and I'd be throwing up stupid character faces.
You were the character guy.
Yeah, just doing a face here and there. Yeah. But funnily enough, one of the guys I was writing with was a much better character painter than me, and he still paints to this day, and he's amazing.
Yeah. So did you guys form a crew, or it's sort of yep?
Yeah. So that was it. We were a very loose collective, full contact, and that was myself, and there was my friend Graham, who wasn't a painter, but he was a DJ. So like we kind of had a little bit of a collective. So that was full contact. It wasn't much. It was a handful of guys who would go out and paint, and then we'd go and DJ once we got into the DJing side of things. My friend Graham, who I mentioned, his name is Graham Sinden. He's known as Sinden, and he now DJs in LA.
Yeah, wow.
Full time. He
Awesome.
came out. He comes over here for. He used to come over here for Good Vibrations, and he toured with Kanye and A-Track, and was MIA's DJ for the Paper Planes era kind of stuff. So it was like we were living together. So it was like there was another guy called Ed, well, Little Ed Pesky, and he was a DJ as well. So we lived in a house. We had a share house. Where
this is off campus?
No, this is off campus. So this is the third year we were in university. We had a share house with the three of us in it and a couple of other guys. But we had 3 turntable setups. Everyone had a setup in their room. So we get home from uni, and it'd just be a sound clash in the house because someone will come in and start DJing.
You got to put them in the lounge room.
And no, it's just they would just be like, oh, Graham's spinning, I'll go and spin in my room, and turn it up a little bit louder so it drowns him out. Then Ed would come home, and so it was just this great kind of group of friends who were learning off of one another and
sharing records.
Yeah, absolutely. So we then became the relative resident at the university. We were playing at the university quite frequently, so we would just go as a 2 or a 3 and back-to-back DJ together, share records.
Yeah,
that's how we do it.
And people are understanding hip hop music more now. It is more mainstream, like obviously there's commercial music out there, pop music, but this is now on the charts and on the radio a lot more.
Yeah, so by this time, this is pushing mid 90s into the mid to late 90s. So we've had Fresh Prince of Bel-Air on TV, and then Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff doing Boom Shake the Room, which suddenly became this commercial success. Yeah. Even before that, they had Summertime, which was a relative commercial success as well. But yeah, there's hip hop is playing on TV. We have Top of the Pops, which you may have heard, which you may be aware of. There's the chart show, used to show on Thursday nights, and by that time you've seen Ice Cube perform on there, and you've seen House of Pain and all the other big names from that era. So hip hop's relatively accepted as this quite a big musical presence now. Yep. However, like the underground stuff, less so, but we know it's there.
But there's still not that much of an actual UK scene. Like it's happening.
No, so by this time there's a pretty prominent UK scene. So I mentioned the Covent Garden days. There's also the Bristol stuff. So from a UK hip hop perspective, you look at someone like, she's not British, but Nena Cherry was coming out in British. I think she's Swedish, but she was pretty much based in the UK. So she did Buffalo Stance, which was a huge pop track with hip hop influence. But she mentions the Wild Bunch in that, which are the Bristol guys, who would then become like Massive Attack and those guys. So that was a scene in itself. And there were steps along the way where we were seeing it in real time, British hip hop. So you had the earlier artists, even things like you had Maloney Love, obviously, who was linked with the native tongue. So she was linked with De La Soul and Queen Latifah. So
that's a whole movement in itself.
yeah. And so we're seeing that. And the De La Soul were relatively commercially successful in the UK. And so there's that. Then we have TV shows. Jimmy Savile, I'm sure you may or may not be.
I've seen the doco about how horribly it ends up being.
So Jimmy Savile was a TV presenter on Top of the Pops. He also had a sort of a TV show called Jim Will Fix It, where he got adults and kids to write in a letter asking to have a dream of theirs made for them and be filmed for it. Well, the opening titles to that at some point were rapped by a British rap group called the Wee Papa Girl Rappers. So it's there's connections. So you can see it. We had a TV show called Record Breakers, which was about the Guinness World Records, and they would have people in the studio trying to break records. And I think had Daddy Freddie come on and was the fastest ever rap.
Yeah.
And again, it's on YouTube. You can see it. Like the history sort of exists as it's there.
Yeah.
And UK hip hop is there. You've got a scene starting to come out in the early 90s, which becomes the precursor or the beginnings of Britcore. So you have Blade and London Posse, and then Demon Boys and Hijack and Hard Noise, which is most of it's quite heavy industrial sound in hip hop, quite fast paced and just, but authentically British.
Yep.
It's this first time now we're starting to hear people rapping in British accents. Yep. Then you get Gunshot and Brotherhood, Gutter Snipes, Lewis Parker, these guys who are now starting to come through. And with this scene starting to be quite successful in its own right.
Yep. Are you hearing it on the radio though?
There is a little bit of access to it. We had Tim Westwood, who is another kind of polarizing figure in the Jimmy Savile category. Who
has he been accused of that
Yes.
sort of? Really, I didn't know that. Okay.
And it's one of those things where it's like, oh, well, the rumors are always there, but he was afforded a platform to present a nationwide radio show on Radio 1, BBC Radio 1, Friday night and Saturday night from the mid-90s onwards. So now you're hearing, I can tune in, and I know I still got tapes of the shows. I would tape them 11 o'clock on a Friday night, press record, and he's playing everything, underground hip-hop, raw hip-hop. He did once a month he would do an exchange show from New York where Funkmaster Flex was DJing. So this is what we've got access to on British free-to-air radio, like this is on the BBC. Yeah. And he would occasionally play a little bit of UK hip-hop. He was always criticised afterwards for not promoting British hip-hop enough, but he certainly did play a little bit.
Yeah. And so, and then I guess, like anything, it's hard to make, it's hard to record, it's hard to distribute. So that's obviously something that takes time. And in a pre-internet era, before anybody could just record and master their own stuff on their computer, it was hard to actually press that stuff up.
Yeah, so it was all kind of do it yourself. There were a couple of acts that got signed to major labels. Brotherhood were one of those. I believe they were on Virgin, and they released, and their music was great. But I know there's the Norwich crew, Deftex were one of the first British acts to sign to a major. They didn't necessarily blow up on a mainstream level, but there was always going to be interest to some extent from the major labels to take advantage of a culture that's happening and maybe profit from it in some way or another.
Cash in on it.
Yeah. Now, whether they could do that, were capable of actually doing that, tended to be not the case. So what then happens is you then get this, what we kind of maybe call like the second sort of real wave of UK hip hop, which becomes the late 90s into the early 2000s independent era, where Brain Tax sets up Low Life Records and releases self-releases, but he also puts out Jest. In line with that, you've got Task Force coming out and Skinny Man.
And the sound is evolving here as well. Like it's more garage sort of related. Like that sound is sort of building.
This is a real British sort of boom bap sound that's
Yep.
happening, which you've got a bunch of producers who are all incredible at that time, who are making great music. But it's quite sort of almost melancholy, quite orchestral at times. But people like Harry Love and Evil Ed, Mark B, and a bunch of other producers that I'm totally forgetting off the top of my head. But those guys had a sound, and it was great. Mark B and Blade. So Blade from the old school links with Mark B, the producer, and they have a commercial run and a startup play, and they release the album The Unknown, and it had a couple of songs that got Top of the Pops exposure, and I believe they got like a rock remix that kind of pushed them a bit further. But it was British hip hop without any compromise.
Yep.
Now on a mainstream platform without having to sacrifice anything. So
Without
they were
selling
pioneers.
out, for lack of a better term.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah.
So they were pioneers in pushing that sound over, but it was only ever going to go so far. The scene itself was still grassroots and kept, very much on that level. We kind of different to the Australian hip hop world. The UK hip hop world was always 12-inch single led and mixtape kind of led. So it wasn't an album arena. So you can go back to the 80s into the 90s up to 2000. There weren't many full albums from UK hip hop artists, but there were thousands of great 12 inches.
Do you reckon that was potentially because it was easier to press records there?
It was an affordability thing.
Right,
Like the costs involved in pressing a 12-inch compared to the costs involved in recording an entire album.
Yeah.
And then distributing in it.
Yeah. You can have a generic record cover. You can tag the front, and that's it. Yeah.
And like half of my record collection, or half of my UK collection, is just white label.
Yeah.
White sleeve, white label. Because we got promo copies. That's how we got them. And then we buy, a bit later on, I'm doing radio myself, so I'm being serviced 12 inches anyway.
Yeah.
But
and that must be, from a DJ's perspective, there's nothing better than people giving you fucking music.
oh, it's the best. Like, it's almost a loan worth doing it.
Yeah.
But it doesn't stop you from also buying records.
No.
So what happens for me at this point is I finished university as a graphic designer. And I'm jaded by graphic design because I hated my course and I hated everything about it.
Because, sorry to cut you off, but I'm just trying to get my head around it. What, is it because there was too much typesetting, too much boring shit?
No, look, the university I was at, the art school I was at, was the only, I believe at the time, university or art school that had the ability to self-award degrees. So, which means our work didn't go out to be marked, it was marked in-house.
Right.
I didn't get along particularly well with my course tutor, and at the time had a habit of being a little bit outspoken. Maybe in a couple of meetings in a classroom setting, I may have sworn at him, called him words I probably shouldn't have done, and as a result, I feel my marking was never appropriately taken fairly.
Yep.
I did my dissertation, which was not marked by him, and I got a first in my dissertation, which is the high, the top grade you can get. But any of my practical work was really low or middling.
But you were confident with it. You were proud.
It wasn't great, but it wasn't terrible either. Like, so when I got my degree, and I did pass my degree, it wasn't the result I thought I deserved, but I lived with it. But I'd been put off the industry by my tutor, specifically by my course leader. So,
which is the opposite of what they're fucking supposed to do.
Absolutely. But it's art school, and there's a big part of art school where you realise that the people teaching at art school are just failed artists, right?
Yeah, and the thing is with that is like you're building a folio, you're making connections. In that real world, I'm guessing you go to get a job, they don't care what marks you want, they want to see your folio.
And look, by the time I'd gotten to art school, I'd realised that exams meant nothing to me. The fact that I don't have to sit an exam again is amazing. I'm saying, this is awesome. Like I could just do practical work. This is amazing. I don't feel like I perform in an exam environment. It's not comfortable for me.
No.
So not having to do that academic side was great. But I've left, and I kind of don't know what to do with myself at this point, but I know that I don't want to be a graphic designer. So I moved to London with my then partner and a group of friends, and we move into a place in Hammersmith. And I get a job with a friend who had been at university the year before, who had left the year before, working in a streetwear and skateboard shop in central London called MASH.
And you're skating as well at this time?
I'd always been a skater. I'm not a very good skater again, but the culture at university was, I'd skated in the 80s. So I'm from the Santa Cruz era skating, and then I stopped. Then when I went to university in the late 90s, I started skating before I went, and then got in with the skate crew there. And it was amazing. And there were people who were at all levels. Like, there were sponsored pros skating with us, and then there was me who could barely stand on a board, but I was giving it a go.
Yeah. And hip hop and skateboarding in that mid 90s, late 90s was a really sort of magical time as well, man.
There's definitely, it was interconnected to some extent. And so I get this job working 9 to 5, whatever it was, in a clothing store, but it's a streetwear store in central London, really busy.
Other creatives around.
Yeah, we all just have and in the shop we were able to play hip hop music. It's a streetwear shop, right? So we got hip hop playing, like some deep hip hop at that point, like anything from the Roots to Gangstar, WuTang to then to Briggs. So we were playing a lot of stuff.
You got turntables in there?
No, not at this point. It's
That
not a
would have
CD
been cool.
system,
Yeah.
but a few years later, I did end up going back and DJing in the shop. So it was all connected. It used to. Prior to me working there, it actually did have a record shop in there as well as a concession, but that had changed. So we've got this skateboard shop and streetwear shop kind of combined. So I'm around a bunch of great skaters and some writers and more musos. So there's a couple of guys who were DJs in there who were DJing the squat parties. So they're playing kind of like the gabba and techno stuff. But
So tell us, for a kid who's lived in Melbourne forever, what's the fucking squat party, man? It sounds cool.
Yeah, no, so it is absolutely amazing. So squat parties were literally illegal raves, but in a city. So
in an abandoned house type
no,
scenario?
in an abandoned
Warehouse.
office.
Oh, okay.
So you would find a venue. Oh, fuck, they did. It might even be in an abandoned sporting arena or something I'm pretty sure there were ones that were done in swimming pools and places like that were just empty.
Yeah.
Because for whatever reason they're derelict or the tenants are no longer occupying them. So they would be in office buildings, but they're broken into. And then sound systems.
They need power.
Their sound systems are set up.
Yeah.
The generators are in there. And then there's these squat parties went on all weekend.
Wow.
And they would just go totally unnoticed. You might be on the fucking 12th floor. No one's going to hear that from the ground floor. And this is a rave going on Thursday to Sunday.
Amazing.
And so that was a world that exists. So one of the guys there was, a gabba DJ who was turning up to work absolutely off his fucking face, having not slept, having DJed all night and probably done a shitload of ketamine, and then working and then going straight back. And it was kind of a cool environment to be in, to sort of see this now. So there's a counterculture that, and you'd have hip hops happening there at times, and you'd have guys rocking up to paint there because it's it's like a squat, it's a rave. So people were writing on the walls. Like you go in one room, maybe someone's painting, then there'd be DJs playing, and it was a great alternative to paying to go to a club or a venue.
Yeah, mainstream shit.
Yeah.
I'm guessing there's no security patting you down. There's none of that sort of stuff.
Yeah, I don't recall that. It was, but there was a lot of dodgy shit going on as well. There'd be people smoking everything from weed to crack to shooting up, whatever. It was all going on.
Here in Melbourne, we never really had, because of the price of cocaine, I'm guessing, crack was never really a thing here. And I know some people have tried to make it, and I guess from novelty purposes. But in London in that 90s, or even today, is it an issue?
Yeah, it was.
It was?
I don't know so much now. I think methamphetamine, ISIS, has become an issue. But before I moved to Australia, in the early 2000s, absolutely, I remember going to gigs in King's Cross, and King's Cross London is quite seedy in the same way King's Cross Sydney is quite seedy. Like, and being at the ATM, getting money out, and just someone coming up asking for a couple of pound for crack. You know, like it was cheap, it was affordable. Like, but the people who've got fucking strung out on it, it's messy. It's really, it destroys people.
It's I guess it's just the overly addictive nature. Seems like we've obviously got issues with other drugs here, but we just never saw that in Australia. I don't
No, and it'd be a cost to like import, getting it into the country. Like, fuck man, like even Coke in England in the 80s into 90s, Coke was considered this yuppie drug. It was a drug that was only affordable for people who were kind of in the business world. And
what would it be like 40 quid a gram or something?
Yeah, like 40 or 50 pound a gram. That is a lot of money in those days, or what it felt like it. Then you come to Australia and find out it's like 300, 400 a gram. I couldn't get my head around it. I was like, how are people even doing this then if it's this expensive? You know?
On the flip side, Australians go to London and they're like, what do you mean it's 40 quid? Like,
yeah. So, like, when you realise the exchange rate and what you're going to get for it.
Yeah.
And look, it was there. It was available. I'm not really I've never been a big drug user, but it was around. So, like I have dabbled here and there, but fortunately I was never one of the people that kind of really got caught up in it.
Yeah. So with the streetwear store, what was it called?
Mash.
Well, that's kind of cool because it's mashing up a bunch of different kind of cultures. It's got the skateboard, it's got the music, the streetwear element. Where do you go from there? Like you've said, the squats are happening. Where's next on your journey?
At that point, where we're located geographically, we're on Oxford Street, which for anyone who hasn't been to London, Oxford Street's like, at the time, possibly still is, the busiest shopping street in Europe. It's right in the centre of London. It's a lot of shops going.
The high street's high street. Yeah.
It's awesome. It's a really good spot. It's crazy busy. But it's also the back end of Soho. So Soho is behind that. And in Soho, all the record shops. So
a bit more culture in Soho.
Yeah, Soho's cool as, and always was. So you go back to the 60s, the Carnaby Street, which is off of Soho there, and all like the mod culture and things like that. So you would see just cool people and cool shit happening. Covent Garden, which I mentioned, the Covent Garden scene is kind of extension of Soho. It's geographically right next door. But at that point, I'm now aware of independent hip hop record shops because I'm working in that environment. So on my lunch break, I'm taking a walk into Soho and going to the record shops. Yep. And at that point, you've got a place called Deal Real, a place called Major Flavors, a place called Wild Pitch, and then there's Mr. Bongo. Now, Mr. Bongo at that point was probably the bigger name of them, like the more recognizable name on the scene. Mr. Bongo was kind of similar to Fat Beats in New York, in the sense that it was a bit of a hub of a record shop that was pushing independent hip hop and the independent hip hop scene of the late 90s into the early 2000s.
So you wouldn't find commercial shit there?
Oh, no, not at all.
Not at all.
And it's all vinyl. It's only vinyl.
Yep.
Vinyl and mixtapes.
Okay.
But you couldn't buy a CD in there.
Just to put it into perspective so we can sort of understand the exchange rate. So a bag of Coke's £50.
Yep.
How much is a 12-inch single? Like
£6.
Okay. So it's still not... And that's probably like an hourly wage, like what you get about £6 an hour, like to try and break it down for Australian audience.
Like I felt when I moved to Australia that records are way more expensive here. But then I'm trying to do a conversion. And it depends on what the exchange rate is. Like I think by the time I was working in a record shop in Melbourne, I think we were selling 12 inches at around about $18, which £6 maybe about $15 at that time. So it's not that far off. Yeah. Like they're being imported. If you're buying an American 12-inch, £6 is £6.50 maybe. Now you can go onto the high street where you've got HMV and Virgin mega stores, and they've got some records in them as well. This is before records stopped being a thing, and then became a thing again. But before, they were more expensive because you're paying import charge on them and whatnot. Like the process
and
for
the
these bigger
overheads
places,
with that.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
So we're in this kind of really cool shop on Poland Street, going to Mr. Bongo, and I believe by that time it's the second iteration of Mr. Bongo. It's moved a couple of times now, and it's set up shop on Poland Street, and that's where I'm now spending all my money. I'm going in there on my lunch breaks, and I'm buying everything. Like I was aware of this shop whilst I was still at university, and I would do mail order from them and ring them up, and they'd play me records down the phone.
Really?
And send them to me. It was amazing. It was a time like they'd send out lists, and then it'd be like, I want this, this, and this, and what else has come in today? And then it's like, oh yeah, I've got this, and we'll play it down the phone to you.
And that period of time, you'd go into the shop and they'd be like, here we go, Mark, you're going to like this and this and this, and they've already got a stack for you.
Yeah. And so they were getting new stock in multiple times a week, boxes coming from the US, as well as the British stuff, which is the British independent scene growing that's coming up at the time. So artists and labels are dropping product off to the shop.
Yeah.
So there's new stock going on the racks.
And a lot of white labels. I'm guessing there's not even a lot of cover art happening in this sort of stuff.
Yeah, there's a whole heap of them. The independent stuff, there's a lot of it is just white sleeves, and then they've written in like marker, like a texter. They've tagged up and written what's on it. And the process, it was awesome. Like I just found somewhere where I was like, oh, this is where I need to be. I'm trying now to pursue my DJing in London, having been DJing at my university campus and a few spots around there. Now I need to take the step to DJ in the hub, in the center of, in the heart of the scene,
where it's happening.
Yeah, and that's hard to break through. But so I'm recording mixtapes, and then I'm taking mixtapes to gigs and shows, and passing them out to people, trying to get them into the right hands, selling them to some people. You know,
what do you get for a mixtape?
Maybe £5, maybe £10. I don't know, like whatever.
Enough to buy another couple of records.
Yeah, it just covers. Yeah. So I'd just go and buy packs and packs of TDKs and just tape to tape record all, you know, in my evenings, and then print out the cover art, cut it all down, and there you go. There's my tape to go. And I was taking them and dropping them off to promoters. Fortunately, while I was still working at MASH sponsored a hip hop night.
Yep.
So I got put in contact with the guys that ran that hip hop night through the boss at MASH, and handed them off a tape. And then I actually ended up becoming quite good friends with one of the guys who ran this night. The night was called Breaking Bread. It was just a cool hip hop, funk and breaks night in a little kind of it was in a pub, I think, initially. But they had they'd rolled out the lino, and they'd had breakdancing happening and all that shit. It was fucking awesome. It was just a really cool scene. But I became quite good friends with Ollie Tough Cut, who was 1/3 of the Breaking Bread crew. And then that gave me a leg up where I got an opportunity to DJ there. And over the years, I played at Breaking Bread a number of times, and always had a great time DJing out with those guys. But yeah, so that's where I'm kind of making my links with promoters, with clubs, with venues.
You're networking.
Absolutely. And at the same time, you know, like I'm starting to take my craft a little bit more seriously. So somewhere along the lines here is where I then realized, after about a year of working at MASH, I probably should get a real job.
Yeah.
And I mean...
Are you there full time?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And a part of me was like, I'm university, I have a degree. Retail is fine, but I want to do something, like, I've got to pay off my student loans. I've got to do something. But, so that's when I enter back into a full-time, or pick up graphic design as a full-time job.
Yep.
And I get a job designing. So I leave MASH and become a graphic designer full-time.
Yep.
At round about this time, I then get offered a Saturday job at Mr. Bongo.
Yeah.
Which is amazing.
Which is where you want to be.
Yeah.
Staff discount?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. They're like, we'll get him to spend all his money here every Saturday.
So I literally didn't take a wage home. I took records home. It was just pay it back in.
Yeah.
But it was amazing. The team there, you had Hugh, Cam, and Tom, who were a production team as well called Beyond There. And they were working with some of the independent artists as well. And they gave me a shot to work on a Saturday. If I remember rightly, I was working there. I was in there one Saturday as a customer, and it was just a crazy busy day. And Tom was working and he was short-staffed, and he just literally said, Mark, can you help out behind the counter? You know the records as well as anyone else, because I was in there all the time and I would have listened to every single record that came through.
Yeah.
Probably bought most of them. So it was just like, yeah, it was just made more sense for me to be the other side of the counter to help him out. And in those days, the process would literally be, the shop was tiny. It was a stretch of counter, records, and then enough space for maybe 20 people.
So like
crammed
Obese,
together.
the same sort of size
Smaller
as
than
Obese.
Obese.
Smaller than Obese.
Yeah.
Jesus.
Like it didn't have the clothing, it didn't have the CDs that
So
Obese
just a
would have.
record.
It was just a record shop, records and a counter, tiny. It would be packed. It would be like standing room, everyone squashed up, shoulder to shoulder, and the process would be we'd pull out a record off of a brand new record's just come in, put it on the turntable, jigger, drop it, volume, full blast, and literally just wait for everyone's hands to go up wanting a copy. And there was something about the sound system in that shop that no matter what the record was, it made it sound amazing.
Yeah.
So records didn't always get time to be put on the racks. It was like, they're on, boom, who wants a copy? Everyone wants a copy. And you just handing them out to people. It was amazing.
Sounds like a scene in a movie or something, man.
So if you ever saw, is it Human Traffic?
Yeah.
That scene in the record shop, I'm almost certain that was filmed in Black Market, which was like 2 streets away from us.
Yeah.
It's just the same. It's exactly kind of how the record shops were in those days. That culture was amazing.
And it's almost like people get caught up in the moment a bit like, you're bidding at an auction. Like, fuck, if I don't put my hand up, I'll miss this one. I'm sleeping on it. So I've got, just take it.
Yeah, so the sound system's great, and there is a pressure to not miss a record. You might only get 10 copies of a record in, or you might get 20 copies in. You may have to wait till next week for the next drop to come through if you miss it. So you just would buy. You hearing it, but it sounded great because it was playing over this incredible loud system.
And I guess you're seeing someone else's hand go up and you're like, I rate that guy's musical choice. If he wants it, I'll take it.
Yeah, and so with that in mind, it becomes like this community.
Yep.
So you do know the other customers, and you do see everyone regularly, and you've got artists coming in as well, and they're buying and they're also dropping off. So like it was this really cool hub with this instant access to this alternative hip hop community that was different to the mainstream.
Yeah. And the other record stores that you mentioned, is there rivalry? Is everyone getting along?
Yes and yes. there's a little bit of rivalry, of course, but we all know each other and it's friendly. So Deal Reel was an incredible shop. You had Pete Reel, they had Shorty Blitz working there. I think Harry Love may have worked there for a little bit. So names in the scene were working in that shop as well. But there were names who had worked in Mr. Bongos before me as well. There's a little bit of weight around being a staff member in these shops to some extent.
Yep.
Now, obviously, at the same time as this, the online forums exist, and they would be shitting on the staff. So people are talking about the staff in Mr. Bongo's always being rude or ignoring me or whatever. So there's, it goes hand in hand with it.
Yeah, I guess, but there's probably kids that are, going to London for the first time to a record shop. They go in there, they're expecting this huge experience, and people are like, hey man, what's happening? What I mean? And that's all they get, and they're like, these guys fucking suck.
Yeah, it was funny. I could see it. So I always felt like I was quite polite with people and gave people the time of day, and I saw the other guys occasionally be rude to them and then find it quite funny as well.
Yep.
But there was a time where someone walked up to the counter with a copy of an EPMD 12-inch, and I think it was It's My Thing, a really obvious EPMD 12-inch, and said, hey, can I listen to this? And one of the guys, I won't say who it was, just said, no. If you don't know this record, then there's no way you're allowed to buy it.
Get out.
And it was just like, he was joking, but it's like, what the people aren't expecting that.
Yeah.
So there's kind of arrogance where it's like, well, fuck those guys, I'm never going back in there, they're rude to me. It's like, oh, you should still know that record though.
Yeah. I guess. So, and you guys are stocking 100% hip hop.
Yeah. Yes, if you consider the shop was also a Brazilian record shop as well.
Okay.
So it's kind of split on 2 levels.
And is there subgenres to this hip hop, or it's mostly just
Yeah, so in the hip hop shop, the room we were in, which is the hip hop shop, at one point I think it was upstairs, and another point it was downstairs, was the Brazilian shop. That was run by different guys, and it was kind of the same shop but a different shop. And they were selling Brazilian funk, soul, and stuff like that. It was kind of a wild if you're into that shit, perfect. In the hip hop section, which we were in, it was brand new, independent hip hop, US, UK, some European, some Australian. Some Australian hip hop did make it over.
What Aussie hip hop was making it
Lyrical
over there?
Commission made it over there.
Yeah, wow.
There was definitely the Lyrical Commission album was up there. I believe the Pegs and Task Force 12 was there. There's a few little bits and pieces.
Yeah, cool.
Nothing, not hugely, but a couple of those little. I mean, they make sense because they've got Pegs obviously had Task Force on it.
Yeah.
And then you'd have things like the Brick Records, Boston stuff. What was that? 7L Esoteric and those guys, because that had Jason Prowler, I think, did some production for him.
And you've got expat Aussies, a lot of them living in London too.
Yeah.
So I'm guessing there is a market within that.
Yeah.
As small as it may be.
Yeah, there's definitely something there. So we had some of that. We had some European stuff. But then we'd have old school hip hop. Like, so there'd be reissues of old school. And then we'd have secondhand stock. So people would sell collections.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that was the best. When someone came in to sell a collection, full on poker face, oh yeah, we'll give you $5 for the lot. And then be like, look at these great records that we pulled out of it. Because we were all collectors.
Yeah, someone who's like, I'm actually going to move to Australia. I'm not going to take my records. You're like, cha-ching, here we go.
Well, no, what it would be was I bought all these when they came out, taped them all onto tape, and that's how I listened to them in the car. Played them only ever once, and it's like getting married and they're taking up too much space, or like my wife, they're in the way. My wife says I've got to get rid of them. If we were finding records that would be like first pressings from the 80s into the 90s of great records in pristine condition. Yeah, you just be like, yeah, what do you want for them?
Gotta play a straight bat.
Inside you're going, fuck, I've struck gold here. Like, it was just the game you had to play.
Yeah.
So we had used records there as well. So like there was always a really good turnover of good stock coming through the shop. Mm-hmm. And then on my lunch break from there on a Saturday, I would go to the other record shop. So I'd go to Deal Reel and pick up anything that we didn't have.
Yeah, and they'd be like, he's fucking spying on us, man.
No, of course. It's like, I'll go and buy what new stock have you got in? Oh, it's stuff that we don't have, so I want that, and that. And then I'd go to Major Flavors and then Wild Pitch. And then by that time, a few other record shops have opened. So there was a pretty cool like hub of good hip-hop record shops in central London that I think most of them don't exist anymore, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But we had a great time. It was awesome. Like the access to the music you had and the access to the people making the music. So working in Mr. Bongo's, we'd have if someone was in town on tour from the US, there's a good chance they may pass through if they get bought through. Yeah. So I'm pretty sure like there was one time where I wasn't there, and I think Timbaland came in and ended up buying like almost £1,000 worth of records to go. And then we had Guru come through there. Awesome. And then I think they had D12 in there at one point as well, and they all kind of didn't realize there was a bit of a disconnect because it was D12, like, and it wasn't quite what we were playing, what we were selling. But then any of the independent guys would come through and do in-stores. Mm-hmm. So you'd have like the Arsonists come through and perform in there, and Sire and Yeshua de Poe or Mr. Complex do an in-store in the shop, and it was awesome.
Yeah. And then you're really leveling up your DJing, and just by working at Mr. Bongo's and having that accreditation levels up your stature within the scene?
Yes, so it's all stepping stones, right? So now I've got my mixtapes, and now I can sell my mixtapes in Mr. Bongo.
Which automatically legitimizes the tape. Yeah.
Right. So I've also got some connections online. So because now people know I was always quite active online as well. So
what forums are we talking? What was happening?
In a world where ozhiphop.com exists, at exactly the same time, ukhiphop.com exists. Mm-hmm. And there's a few others. There's like Hip Hop Site or the Feel a Flavor Troy blog. There's a few international ones, but the main one we're on at that time is ukhh.com. And it is I don't know if you remember the Oz forum. Okay,
but it's just like a forum.
Yeah, it's a music forum, but this is the UK version of it.
Different threads and different...
different rooms. So this is general chat. This is
underground UK
releases, whatever, like live shows. And you'd post a topic and people would reply to them. And my day job as a graphic designer, I'm just sat online all day long.
Yeah.
I've got PC here and Mac here, a couple of screens, and I'm just operating and working between my graphics work. But I've got the internet open the entire time. So if I'm not, I've got tabs up. I've got ukhh.com, Fat Beats, Dusty Grooves. And so these are all the record shop, all the ones where I'm buying records. Because I'm buying records.
Yeah.
Even though I'm working in a record shop, I'm buying the records I can't get. I've got a full blown addiction at this point.
I don't know how you're fitting all these records somewhere in London though. Like as in it's.
Yeah, look, everywhere. My wife will attest when we moved from London to Melbourne. But at that point, records were in every room, bathroom, under the kitchen, like everywhere, just stacks everywhere.
Yeah,
I have a pretty solid collection now. It's downsized, but back then I had everything. Like everything new, I had to play it. I had to get it. I was just addicted. But yeah, so I'm buying records, but I'm also just talking all day long on the chat sites about hip hop and about promoting myself or getting gigs, and we're just communicating. And we ended up there's a community forms online as would be expected, and then we all meet up at venues. So the UKHH guys might be putting on a night. Yeah. So I might, because I'm cool with those guys, they might give me a gig there. So I'm DJing at one of their events, and then I'm meeting everyone who I've been speaking to online for the last 2 years.
So there's the shop credibility, then there's the online stature as well, and you put them together. Yeah.
So it's all kinds of becomes a big thing together. At this time, on top of that, my graphic design, there's magazines are still a thing, and there's a few independent magazines happening in the UK. I don't know how many of them made them to Australia, but you had Fat Lace, Fat Boss, Lowdown, Big Daddy, Grand Slam, all these kind of magazines that were proper magazines coming out, but you couldn't buy them in the newsagents, but you could buy them in the hip hop shops and stuff like that. There's another magazine comes out, a magazine called Undercover, which is being based in central West London, and I kind of have a hookup. I connect with one of the people heavily involved in, I believe, editing it, a guy called Ewan, who I'm seeing online, and then we're at shows and we're kind of chatting, and it turns out there's an opportunity for a design role, freelance, because it's all kind of freelance. So I was like, I'd love to do some design work for Undercover magazine. So I now have a foot in with a magazine that I am doing some layout for. Like every time issue will come out, I might have a handful of pages that I've designed for them, submit them, it goes to print.
You getting a credit there?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool.
Getting a credit and a paycheck, like not much, but it's cool.
And I'm guessing that your full-time gig is not very interesting design work. Oh, I'm just guessing.
Yeah, no, you'd be right. Like it was corporate.
Yeah.
And industry. So it was just...
It's paying for more
I'm
records.
sat on a computer. Like, honestly, it was an easy job. It wasn't taxing. It afforded me an opportunity to be online all day long, sourcing records, sourcing connections, and then also doing freelance work.
Yeah, and limited ability, I'm guessing, to be creative. You're just got to...
That's the issue.
Yeah.
That's and that becomes pertinent later. Yes, it's pretty dreary and pretty soul-destroying if that's all I was doing. But I had the keys to the office. I lived 200-meter walk from the office.
Yeah, nice.
So I could do after-hours shit in the office all the time. So I was
You can
there.
get your mates over and have a squat party.
Oh, yeah, well... We had parties in that shop quite a lot, funnily enough, because initially the manager I had there was really fucking cool. And on Monday night we'd be like, hey, let's go and get really fucked up, and we would.
Nice one. So now you're starting to actually get some design work happening within the industry. You've got the DJing thing happening. It's all falling into place, man.
Yeah, so I'm working on a magazine and I'm contributing to the magazine. Sometimes I've done an interview that's gone on the UKHH here and there. Like
writing articles?
Yeah, so a little bit involved. I was supplying charts to the lists of charts to the magazine, and they were getting published.
Like in-store charts, what's...
Like, just your top 10 records of the month, cool's coming out, the occasional review.
So you're becoming a fucking tastemaker, though.
Yeah, it's baby steps, but I'm finding my foot in an industry and beginning to make a little bit of a name for myself.
Are you aware of this at this point? Are you doing this? Are you like, okay, this will level up here, or is it just naturally happening?
Yeah, a bit of both. Like, there's a part of me where ideally I want to be at this level, but I'm not going to get there overnight. So just take the steps and just keep building and building and building. And that's what I'm doing. At this point, I'm then contacted by... I'm not contacted by, I contact Itch FM, which is the radio station I ended up presenting on. Mm-hmm. So radio in England's a bit different to it is in Australia. We have pirate radio, and that in itself is its own culture. It's completely illegal. And this is a sort of pre-internet radio world. Like the internet exists, like I've told you.
You're not streaming.
No, none of that. Like, even YouTube doesn't. YouTube doesn't exist at this point. So like
YouTube 2005 maybe.
Yeah, so like that doesn't really. This is before that. So in London we've in the UK, but certainly in major cities, pirate radio has existed for a long time, and it is literally the case of some individuals illegally broadcasting on a wavelength. Mm-hmm. They have to set up a antenna and all this shit like to do it, and receiver and that, and send out a broadcast on a band, and people can hear it. In London at that time, they had Itch FM. Itch FM was a hip hop radio, the only 100% hip hop radio station.
Pirate radio,
pirate or otherwise, in London, and it was only broadcasting weekends. So they were then taking this step to, we're going to go 7 days a week. Mm-hmm. Like, this is a good thing. Like, and half of my connects, my older peers, are on this. Have got shows. Yeah. So through them, and through being a listener of Itch FM, I find out that they're looking for DJs for midweek shows, and I get in contact with them, send them a tape, and they give me a gig. So I get a weekly radio show.
And let's break it down for people that don't really know. It's obviously all happening illegally, but it's not like the cops are out looking for it. People are able to sort of say within the message boards and stuff, this is the frequency you've got to be in this area. And where do they set up these studios or whatever? Like,
so there is an element that the police are hunting them.
Really? Because the push from the broadcasting authorities? Yeah, okay.
Because you're illegally broadcasting without a license and essentially stealing band wavelength, often off of the end of another real radio station. So like at the time, Itch FM was 105.15 FM. That was our wavelength, but that was on the end of another radio station that might be in 104 points. You know, like, so you're kind of just tapping into that dead space and broadcasting. We're advertising that we exist, and the station, for all intents and purposes, to any listener, sounded legitimate and professional because they operated as legitimately and professionally as they could, so as not to become the main target of the police, or what we call, the DTI, which is the branch that was forced with shutting down illegal broadcasting. So that meant we weren't swearing on air.
Yep.
It meant there were adverts on it. there were adverts on it. People paid to
So
have
if you
adverts.
scanned across, you wouldn't even notice it.
You might not notice it. Yeah. And it was, there wasn't heaps, like if you've ever seen People Just Do Nothing, or which is based around a real, it's a parody of a real pirate radio station. That kind of thing was definitely how most pirate radio stations were operating. People coming and going, lots of people in the studio rapping and blah 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 blah. Ours wasn't like that. Ours was quite secretive because it had to be to remain professional.
Yeah.
So
you were militant with it and did it professionally. Yep.
Yeah. So the operation was very strict. You weren't allowed loads of people in the studio. You were only allowed to be in the studio on your own. You weren't allowed to tell people where they were. If you wanted a guest on, you had to go through the channels with the management to make sure that they're okay with that person coming in, because that person, if they don't know them, maybe that's someone who, like, where's it going to go? So as a result, the studio changed quite frequently because...
Got to stay one step ahead.
It got raided or whatever. So we would be in North London mostly, or Northwest London, and we would be in commission housing mostly, in apartment. So commission housing in London, there's way more of it than there is in Melbourne. Coming over here and see a couple of high rises, that's it. Park Towers or whatever you've got. In London, there's lots and lots of high rises which are public commission housing, so housing benefits.
Some people do own those as well, don't
Yes.
they? Then they sublet them in a whole lot of grey areas there.
Yes. So initially, a lot there was a push in the late 90s, I think, to sell off commission housing to the residents that owned it really cheap, giving people who had lived there their entire life, who have nothing or on a very limited income, an opportunity to become homeowners. And then that then creates this, oh, well, then we can sublet that and we can make money. And it's all a bit of a grey area as far as I'm aware. But yeah, like some of the times we were in like crack houses, it felt, like there was a lot of weird, for someone to be like, hey, can we rent this off of you, just this one room in your apartment? And we're going to have people coming and going every day. Like,
And we're going to have
what environment is that? It's not going to be someone's normal, like the living environment for that is not going to be a family home, like it's it is this weird environment where suddenly I'm getting a message and go, oh yeah, the studio's been raided. We're now at this location, and then turning up there, knocking on a door, sort of peeking through the door, making sure it's me, sort of shutters closing, locks opening, being allowed in. And it was quite covert, but it was awesome. It was good fun. But it also was kind of dangerous too. Like I was out there, I did a show initially I was doing a Thursday show at 10 p.m. till midnight, traveling across London with a bag of records onto council estates, commission housing, where it wasn't always the nicest places you're in. Yeah. So it's a bit of a culture shock.
But that's all part of it, and I think that adds to the mystery, the mystique, and something that we don't really have here. Wiz does his pirate radio thing, but it's a culture that we kind of lacked here. It's really cool to hear about.
Yeah, look, and it was a weird one when I came to Australia and then got an opportunity to be on a couple of radio shows here and be like, oh wow, like PBS or whatnot. Like this is awesome that you have these opportunities to have legitimate shows, which we kind of didn't have the community radio option.
Really? So there's nothing like that?
I think there is, but it's not as accessible. Like we're just like, we'll just go out and do it ourselves. Yeah. And so we'd go and broadcast from a high-rise flat in North London, and then the DTI inevitably will find us, take down our aerial, maybe even raid the studio. And
is there criminal charges pressed? There really is.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So it happened a few times. I won't name names because I don't want to incriminate anyone, because obviously I think criminal records become associated with that. But there was definitely a time where one of our friends got raided live on air. Wow. And then he certainly had to go to court over it. And there's loads of things then placed upon you about whether you can broadcast legally ever again and stuff like that. Yeah, wow. His records were confiscated that he had with him. The equipment was confiscated, and then we all kind of like, oh, let's chip in and donate to hopefully make it better for him.
When something like that happens, does the station rebrand? Do you come back as something else, or you still stick with it?
We will just change location.
So, but you'll keep the same. We call it the same thing. The programming's the same. Yeah,
it's just down for a little bit, and then it's up again. And it didn't happen often, but we did move around and things. Maybe I didn't know the ins and outs because I wasn't involved with the managerial side, but maybe interpersonal relationships may change for the location, or the lease might run out on the property. So then, someone else is going to move in. We've got to move out, and so it changed. And it was fun though. Like it was this. You were covert. You were
it's
ninjas.
Graffiti in a way.
It was the same feeling you get from going out painting, you would get from going out broadcasting. Yeah. And am I going to get caught? But then it also poses its own risks as well. Like, so going to radio was the only time I ever had a gun pulled on me was going to the radio station. And
to do with the radio, or just because you're in the council estate and you were.
It's the environment. It's the environment. There's no reason why I don't pass for someone that couldn't be on a council estate. Yeah. But you enter areas where there's risks are involved, and I walking around in a certain part of London onto an estate, carrying a big bag of records with expensive headphones around my neck, and at a certain time of night, and you sometimes walk past the wrong people and attract the attention of the wrong people. And that's what happened. I had a gun pulled on me and nothing happened. I just kept on walking, pretending I didn't see it. Like, it was kind of waved at me, and then I just kind of head down. But like, that's just, and they were younger. They were much younger than me.
Yeah.
But it's just one of those things where like, oh, like you shit yourself because you're like, oh fuck, like I have to remember where I am at all times.
Yeah. So I'm guessing that really takes, we're talking about leveling up your status. A lot of people are hearing you.
Yeah.
You're out there playing the music that you want to play with no commercial or no one breathing down your neck saying that's not it.
Yep.
Plus you're now designing for stuff that you want to do. Where do you go from here, man? You're really starting to get there. You're getting up that ladder.
Yeah, so I'm thinking this is great. Things are going well. And then I meet my wife, or the woman who will become my future wife, who is Australian. There's someone coming over to England on a working holiday visa. And we met through the forums. So we met through UKHH.
Yep. So she was into her
my wife was into hip hop.
Yep.
Big into hip hop. My wife introduced me personally to the Hilltop Hoods because she knew those guys. She had a connection with some of the Adelaide crew. She knew some of the local guys as well. She'd been into hip hop forever. At the time, I didn't really know any of this, but the way it plays out is, say 6 months before she's coming over to England, she reaches out and sets up an account on UKHH to find people to go to hip hop shows with.
Great idea.
Which is awesome. Like, oh, hey, I'm going to be in town. I don't know anyone. What's good? And so she starts chatting with all my people. I'm aware of her. We're not really talking one-on-one, maybe a message here and there in the context of a conversation, but I don't really know her. But she's chatting with one of my really good friends, actually my housemate at the time, Ghost. And Ghost is a producer in the UK, and someone who I ended up also doing a radio show with. We ended up amalgamating our radio shows as to one. But I'm living with Ghost, and he's chatting with my wife. She's not my wife yet. For whatever reason, they've had a bit of back and forth because she's trying to find out where to go, what shows to do. And for some reason, on this one particular day, he's not around to respond to her messages. So she sends me a message. She said, hey, I know you and Ghost live together, or you and Ghost are tight, or whatever. And we start talking, and it's really cool, and we just vibe. But there was never any intention of it becoming a relationship at this point. We're just two people who are just like, yeah, well, when you come over, I'll be doing this show, so you can come with us. And we'll,
so she's not even in the country yet?
No, this is 6 months before she's come.
Wow, she's really planning it out.
She's putting the groundwork in.
Yeah, for sure.
So she's got her aunt and her partner are living in London at this time, so she's going to come over and stay with them. Awesome. She's going to be here for a few months, and I just want people to go to gigs and shows and clubs with. So we're like, yeah, cool. Come with us to this, come with us to that. At this point, I'm playing at a bunch of venues, and I'm doing my radio, whatnot, all these things going on. She eventually, at this point, it's kind of wild because she just knows everything. We know it. We're sharing information about each other that you might not generally share with a potential partner. Like, this is pre-Tinder, this is that kind of stuff. Like, she knows the shitty sides of me because I'm not trying to impress her to win her as a date.
Yeah.
And likewise, I know that, yeah. So it's this wild world where when she finally comes over and we meet and the chemistry is there immediately, it's just like, oh yeah, but I'm a scumbag.
But that might have played into your favor.
It was great. Like, so we met. She came over. We met. We hit it off straight away and were inseparable from that point onwards. She would come to all the shows. We'd go out together. We went to venues and events and did a bunch of things. And things get a bit more serious. And she was only supposed to be in England for a couple of months and ended up staying almost 2 years because we got together.
Yep.
And at this point, it's like, I don't want to. I can't be here for much longer. Like I've got a 2-year working holiday visa. It's cold. Like I don't like the cold Christmases.
It's fucking cold, man.
Yeah, but I'm used to it. This is what I'm expecting.
From
right?
an
So,
Australian point perspective, it is.
So she says to me, like it's, well, what are we going to do? I'm going to have to go home at some point. We either break up or you come with me. Mm-hmm. So at that point, I said, well, why wouldn't I come with you? Like, so we make a plan for before we move to come and visit Australia. I've not been to Australia at this point. So she's like...
Have you travelled much in Europe or anything?
A little bit. The wildest thing about this is I was in a relationship previously with a girl who all she wanted to do was travel. And I said, fucking doesn't interest me. Why would I want to go anywhere? I'm in London.
And you're leveling up and you're progressing and
I've just got no interest in travel. It turns out I just had no interest in travel with that person. It's the person dictates that, right? Like, so I'd lost a relationship partly because I didn't want to travel. And now I'm in a relationship with someone I'm forced to travel, we've done a lot of traveling together all around the world, which has been amazing. But it's never anything that really interested me. Yep. So she says to me, we'll do a holiday. We'll come to Australia. You can meet my family. Make sure like you'd want to live here. So we come out here January 2005 for a holiday. Yep. We come out for a month. And at this point, I'm like, oh, well, what am I going to do with my music shit? Like, I'm going to want to continue this. This is the journey I'm on. But how am I going to do that in Australia? Like, do I have to start from the very beginning again and work my way up? I've just spent the last 5-10 years trying to get to this point. Now I'm going to take a massive backward step and build it all again. Like, how's it going to work? But fortunately, I had some connections. So a good friend of mine back at home is a guy called Pete, also known as Disorder. Disorder in the UK has done for many years, had run Suspect Packages, which was a UK hip hop record shop, like an online shop for all UK hip hop, everything.
It's a great name.
Yeah, and he was like, funny enough, Pete was born in Australia, moved to England, and then became the go-to person for UK hip hop. He had radio station on Itch, and he had mixtapes coming out. He had connections to everyone in the industry in the UK. He came out to Australia the year before I came out on that holiday with Maestro, Brain Tax, and then he came out and DJed for them, I believe. So he did a tour of Australia. He already had hookups in Australia. And so he said to me, oh, well, I can give you some names. So he linked me with Reason and Josie Styles in Sydney, who I don't know if you know, but the whole Sydney crew were awesome. So I get given these contacts, and then I reach out. I get booked a gig in Sydney.
When you're just on a holiday?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool.
So I'm like, I'm going to come over. I'm going to play. I'm coming over. This is what. Just send my resume. This is who I am. This is what I do. You probably never heard of me, but I'm doing something in the UK. Great. Link up with Reason. Link up with Josie. Come to Melbourne. Meet Reason straight away. Get on like a house on fire. He's awesome. He puts on. There was a tsunami benefit show at the Prince of Wales, which I get a gig at. So that's what he was hosting it, I believe. And there's a load of Oz hip hop acts on that night. I also get a gig. I forget what venue. I always get confused between Laundry and First Floor.
Laundry's in Fitzroy. First Floor's also in Fitzroy, but one's on Johnson, one's on Brunswick.
I forget which one. Anyway, we're playing at one of them and it's upstairs.
Yeah.
I got a gig there. That's the first gig I get, and it's Maestro from the UK is over as well. So he is performing, and then there's a rap battle on first, then Maestro, then me. Yeah. I rock up there to that and meet. I know Maestro from the UK, so he's like, "Hey, I don't have a DJ. You can DJ for me." Like, so this is how I made all of these kind of connections quite well. So I've come out for a holiday, and played a few gigs. It was great, and what I realized very quickly was it didn't matter that no one knew me, because I just could put UK after my name, and that's a selling point in itself. Like,
Yeah,
so
you're
it's
international.
Like, yeah, we've got an international guy. He's come over. He's performing. And you may not know him, but he has mixtapes. And
as long as your music's good and you do the right thing, people are going to go, yeah, that's sick.
yeah, so I come out, we do that. I do some great shows, get on well with Reason. Go up to Sydney, see Josie, do a great show up there, have fun. Go into Obese for the first time on Izzet Street in Paran. Meet Frank.
So Frank's behind the counter?
Frank's behind the counter. So it's Frank. The day I went in there once or twice while I was there, introduce myself, say hi, kind of connect with everyone. Tell them, at the time I'm working at Mr. Bongo still, so it's kind of like I've got a bit of an awareness of how the record shop industry works, and that's like, hey, this is who I am. There's another guy working there, James, who was awesome, who would end up becoming a really good friend of mine here. And yeah, buy a few Australian hip hop records. I take them back, go back home after the holiday. Go, yeah, we can do the move. That's fine. I'm on radio playing some of the Australian hip hop that I've brought back with me.
How's that received?
Yeah, it's received. It's enjoyed. Like it is what it is. Like the music I'm playing it's in the same pocket as what I'm doing. Very similar to the UK stuff. I think. Like I'm playing a little bit of Coolism. I'm playing a little bit of Reason. I can't remember everything. But there was stuff there. There's a Coolism track with Rodney P. So I was like, oh, that's a good kind of crossover here. We're bridging the gap. And I maintain contact, though, from that point with Reason. So Reason and I just send each other messages from time to time. So I feel like I've built this pretty significant relationship. Then the 2005 London bomb happens on the underground. My wife, Corey, she's on holiday. I think she's gone to Greece with her cousin this week when this happened. So I'm on my own in London. And the train I take to work is the same line that is bombed, but maybe 5 or 6 trains after the one I'm on. And if you've ever been to London, you know how quickly trains come. 2 minutes, 2 minutes, 2 minutes, just keep going. So maybe the 5 or 6 after me, this bomb goes off on. I get to my work in the morning, get off the train, and the stations are all shutting down. I'm like, what's going on? They said, they think there's an electrical fault. They're not telling us the information of what's happened. Yeah, but there's chaos. All the mobile phone networks aren't working because they shut off all the phone networks because they thought bombs were being detonated by mobile phone. And so I go to work as normal and I jump on the boards and I'm chatting away on UKHH and not really knowing what's going on, but there's a bit of panic in London. And I get an email from Reason, and Reason say, hey, are you okay? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. What's going on? The news had been reported in Australia but it was a bomb attack. But it hadn't been reported in England because they thought it would cause panic. So Reason was actually the person that hipped me to what had actually happened. And I'm like, I'm fine. And my wife's obviously seen the news in Greece and is trying to fucking contact me, but my mobile's not working.
So she's sketching.
Yeah. So it was kind of wild time, but it kind of, I think it further cemented that relationship with my Aussie crew, like who were all just like rallying around, trying to make sure I'm okay. And I'm perfectly fine. Like, and the resilience of Londoners is that a bomb goes off, it doesn't change anything. We're back on the train tomorrow. Like, it's not going to stop us.
You can't, though.
But it's always been the way. And we grew up in London with, or in the UK with the IRA. And the IRA were bombing central London. Like, it's not unusual to us for this to happen. Yep. But there's
keep calm and carry on. That's what
keep calm and stiff upper lip. It's just like, I'm not going to let them disrupt my day. I'm going to crack on. So you just crack on. My wife was kind of shook by it. I know that much to be understood. And then at that point, the year's kind of rolling around. I stopped doing radio because it's an illegal activity, and I'm now applying for my visa to get into Australia.
You don't want any
so I can't afford a criminal record. Yeah. I've long given up graffiti for a similar reason. Like I'd stopped painting pretty much by that point, just because I was doing all the other shit. But like I'd still have a pen on me, and I would still bomb toilets or wherever I was. But now I've got to be on best behaviour there. Mr. Bongo's closes down.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So that's like the end of an institution.
Yes.
And is this a byproduct of the internet?
It's a product partly of the internet and partly of records falling out of favour.
Yeah, they have their dip.
So the record buying, like record shops are now closing down. I can't tell you how expensive Soho rent is, but it's going to be high, right?
Yep.
And the overheads for the running those places as an independent shop are going to be crazy. So they close down. It's the end of an era. We have a closing down party. It's awesome. We've got, but that closes. So I'm now in preparation mode for moving.
It's the end of a chapter.
Yeah. It was a good time. Like the scenes. This is what's happening. So my wife then says, "Well, let's pull our move to Australia forward. Let's closer, and we'll go before Christmas." And so we moved out here in early mid-November 2005, and we made the move. And
almost 20 years.
It's coming up. Yeah, it's crazy to think, but so we go through a process of how do I get all my shit over here? I've got so many records. Yeah. It is insane. I think people talk numbers of records like in the record collecting community online, whatever. Oh, I've got loads of records. Putting a number on it is such a abstract idea because you cannot physically understand how many that is just by saying. If I said I have 5,000 records, some people might think that's a lot. Some people might think it's not a lot, but you can't even imagine how much space 5,000 takes.
Yeah.
At this point, I've probably got about 8,000 or 9,000 records. And it's just like, they're fucking everywhere.
Yeah.
What do I do with them?
Yeah.
So, and how am I going to get them all to Australia? So we are going through the process again, the visa, which is expensive. And we've got to pay for the flights and we've got to pay for shipping. So I sell off a bunch of records. So this is the first cull of the record collection.
How are you doing that through the record stores? No,
this is eBay.
Right.
So eBay is a thing. So I just list records, and I basically sold off all my doubles. I was like, as a DJ, I've got 2 copies of a lot of records because for DJing purposes, even though I'm not like a turntablist as such, I can do basic juggles and basic cuts, and I always did, but I'm not Q-Bert. So I'm just like, well, I'll sell off all my doubles. And we do, and we sell very quickly.
Were you were you keeping a catalogue, I'm guessing, like as you're collecting them? Or are you someone who just buys them, stacks them up?
No, so the way my brain works is everything has to be in order.
Yeah.
Even chaos in all its organized chaos, like
alphabetized,
absolutely alphabetized, 100%, very strictly as well. So it's alphabetized in artist name, then chronologically as to when they were released.
Fuck, man! Don't look over there. There's shit everywhere.
So my record. I still obsess over it to this day. Wow. It's something I still go back and I'm moving records and doing stuff. It's not OCD, but it's not far off.
It sounds like it might be.
No, to be honest with you, I know someone. I have a client at the moment who's OCD, and I would never belittle what his situation by saying that mine is that, but it is not far off. It is very thorough. So I've got 2 of that. I've got a spare of this. I've got a spare of that. And I've got a couple of stuff that I didn't need. I sell off my records very quickly to the point that we get an email. I think it was through PayPal. It was almost like an audit about whether I was laundering money.
Yeah. Just bang, bang, bang. Yeah.
Yeah. We were able to prove it, obviously, but there was definitely a flag got raised as to what I was selling, how quickly I was shifting stock. But that covered the cost of the shipping of everything. I'd get a shipping container to ship all of my stuff. It covered the cost of my visa, our flights. I think we bought a new computer with it as well.
So it's like a store of value, though, because you're probably buying a lot of them at discounted rate. They appreciate in value. So for all the people out there telling their partners to fuck their records off, you can make money out of it.
Yeah, because at that time I was on all the promo lists. So because I'm playing on radio and because I've got mixtapes, I had been on promo lists. So I have a PO box set up that every day I'd go to work, and it's a PO box near my work, that on my morning cigarette break, if you will, I'll walk down to the post office and pick up a stack of records that have been sent to me, which will be promos from a bunch of different promo distributors. Some will be junk, some will be good, some I'll play, some I'll keep. The rest I'll take and sell to the record shops or whatever, like exchange and whatnot. Let's say you just
Part of the
tools.
ecosystem.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a world where these records existed, but I sold a bunch off and it covered my costs of getting here. I move out here, and it's warm and it's November 2005. Cronulla riots is happening, and I'm not working and I'm at home in Melbourne. Just like, what have I come to? Like, this crazy shit's going on.
So the heat was actually a deterrent for you. You thought it's too hot.
Yeah, like I came out here and it was warm, and I was not used to it.
What am I going to do with all these coats?
My wife has family in Cairns, and we spent the first couple of Christmases in Cairns.
Jeez, man, yeah.
And it was just horrific.
You would have got burnt, dude.
The weather was not for me. Now, almost 20 years down the line, I'm hoping for it to be 40 degrees. I want that. But in those days, it was just like, it was too much of a culture shock. But it was amazing still, you know, like I'm just out of work though at this time. So like I struggle to get work, but the night we get in, we meet up with Reason at a show. And again, it was either Laundry or First Floor, one of those two. I always get the two confused, so I can never remember. Catch up with him and it's great. And almost instantly he's like, oh, you know, like I'm looking for a DJ. Do you want to become my DJ? And of course I do, because that gives me that instant step into the scene now. I don't have, why wouldn't I want to be Reason's DJ? Reason is a very respectable and beloved member of the Melbourne and Australian scene.
Yep.
This is the golden ticket. At the time,
good foot in the door.
Yeah, absolutely. But like, it's just instantly, it's certified. Great. Probably to a higher level than I felt I may have deserved at the time. Like, awesome. So,
but as we talked about, you were stepping up this ladder, but then coming over here, you've taken a few steps backwards because of love and whatever. Yeah. But this has put you up a couple.
Yeah. So this is an in. And yeah, I love doing that shit. I had done a little bit of DJing for a couple of acts in the UK as a stand-in DJ for live shows, so I knew what was expected of me. I knew how the role worked. At the time, he had Kilo from Art of War was in and out of DJing for him. So we did a few shows where he had two DJs, where it was me and Kilo, and it was great. Like, as a old DJ myself, and for all the DJ nerds out there, in 2005, it's an interesting time. It's sort of pre-Serato for these live shows. CDJs, you've got the tell us how it works. 2005, Serato is a thing. It is a thing. It's early. SL1. It's been around a little bit. I don't have it.
Right.
So I'm a vinyl snob who has not invested in Serato at this point and has been saying, fuck that shit. Like, the real hip hop's done on, it's done on records, whatever. Like,
you wouldn't even fuck with CDJs at this.
So we would have a CDJ, a single CDJ to play some of his beats off of, and everything else was done on vinyl. Right. So I'm not doing anything with that CD except for press and play, and then I'm cutting on the vinyl, or I'm mixing in a vinyl instrumental for him to do to rap over. And sometimes like a rapper's going to rap over someone else's instrumental to break up the show. Yeah. That's where I cut that in, stop the CD, let that run, then bring up the next track on the CD. But for all intents and purposes, I'm not fucking with Serato at all. Right. And this becomes detrimental eventually.
Well, it would be, yeah, for sure.
Because that's what everyone is doing. So we're going to shows and I'm like, I need two turntables set up and they need to be grounded. So I go to sound checks. This is where you learn that so many fucking artists don't go to sound checks. And so I'm going to sound checks and they're like, oh, it's not set up properly. I go, yeah, right, that's why I'm here. So I need to know that it's going to be good to go when I turn up and play my record, because you've not grounded it, because maybe Serato doesn't need to be grounded. So there's tech shit going on. But it's good. Like, I'm happy. I'm always willing. It was shitty because we're traveling interstate. And I've got to travel with a bag of records.
Yeah. But also...
no one else is.
Yeah, you've got to press up all these instrumentals on actual vinyl, when with Serato, you can just have that. And that's essentially what makes it, I'm guessing, what makes it too hard.
Yeah, like so. That's so having a CD. He's got a CD of his instrumentals. Awesome. So we'll run off of that CDJ, and I can use the vinyl in between. It gets to a point where we're doing quite a lot of shows. We're traveling around the country. I'm establishing myself. I get a job working Saturdays in Obese, thanks to Frankie.
Yep. How did that come about? Did you ask? He asked you. You just hung around until
Yeah,
he gave you a job?
if I recall, it's probably a bit of all of that. Yeah. Like Frankie knew I'd had the Mr. Bongo experience. And as abstract as that is to anyone who's never been to Mr. Bongo's, if you know of Mr. Bongo's, then awesome. It's like I said, it's like a Fat Beats. For a while there was a Mr. Bongo's in Tokyo. So like it was, it's got a name in itself. It carries a little bit of weight. And certainly for someone like Frankie, who's working in this industry, he would know what that is and what it means. So I get a gig here. To work Saturdays, and I'm generally working with James, who was the other guy that I met that time, who becomes a good friend and a good part of our social circle. And we're at a great time in Australian hip hop.
It was huge then, yeah.
Obese history it's perfect. So much happening on. We have this social circle which is amazing, but it's kind of diverse as well. You have myself and James, who I said, James Confey, who was working at Obese. You had some of the Nine High guys, the British guys, had come out around about the same time as me. So you've got Fracture, Briggs and Scotty Hines all in this crew together. You'd have Nate Flagrant was around, and Phrase was just coming up at the time. There was another British guy who lives out here called Del 76, producer. He was in the mix, and we would all meet up in Paran on a Saturday after working in Mr. Bongo. I'm sorry, in Obese.
Which must have felt a bit like Mr. Bongo.
Yeah, it was this, and then we were having a social barbecue in Paran Parks, and then people like Bunks would show up, and so all these guys who were connected more with Nine High and those guys, which then became, Checkmate might be around.
I was just about to mention,
it was this really cool time, but a really diverse selection of different types of people in the Australian scene, all coming together and hanging out. Reason would come along. Sometimes you'd see Muff there, Muffin. Bias might be around, it was just that these really cool guys out together, and still at the time we had Hilltop Hoods and Funkors on the label.
Yeah. So
when they were around, we'd catch up with them. So instantly, I'm like, oh great, I'm in. This is awesome.
Yeah.
This is where I want to be.
Obese wasn't part of the scene; it was the scene at that stage, really.
To work on Saturdays and have people traveling from interstate or rural just to come to see, I'm here now, I've come in to see Obese, and all they want to do is buy the latest Obese releases, an Obese car sticker, window sticker, the
car decals at the back, fatter than your mama,
the support Australian hip-hop sticker, and an Obese t-shirt. That's all they wanted, and they were fucking made up, and then they'd be out the front taking photos of themselves with it. It was incredible. The scene was amazing, but then going and doing the shows was also really engaging. Like the scene were really fully behind it.
Yep.
Whereas if I'd go to a UK show, like when I was playing in the UK, the crowds were different no matter where I played, and they were mostly men. I go to an Australian hip hop show, there were women and there were girls in the show. There were fucking groupies at the shows. Like it was like, this is a different world. Like the Australians really do support Australian music and content.
Yep.
Sometimes to a detriment in itself. Like I remember working in the shop and people coming in and berating the music we were playing because it wasn't Australian or it was some American black shit.
Yeah, that is a issue that kind of happened at that early 2000s. There was dudes that were like, if it's not Aussie hip hop, if it's not white guy backyard hip hop, then it's nothing. And that has definite racial undertones to it,
100%.
and it's not quite the mindset of where music needs to be because it's inclusive, you know.
It was really confusing to experience that, like, because the Aussie scene felt quite white.
The diversity wasn't there, I don't think, reflected not only in Aussie hip hop but in Australian music in general.
Yeah, sure.
And it's sort of sad that a lot of that stuff that was getting commercial play on Triple J or whatever was predominantly white, but that as you can see now definitely changed.
Yes, absolutely. And that was a surprise to me when I came out here and I was like, oh, like, I know that there are a lot of white people in Australia. I'm not stupid. And at this point, there hadn't been as big a African migration at the time. But Australia has its own indigenous population. Why are these people not the forefront of the hip-hop scene here? Whereas in the UK, the Afro-Caribbean community was still, for the most part, the major driving force in the UK hip-hop. So, like, UK hip-hop had a white element to it for sure, but it was still very much a black culture. Come to Australia and it's like, oh man, like, go to a show and everyone is white.
Yeah.
Fuck, I went to... Lord Finesse came and performed out here. We went to a gig in the city somewhere early on around this sort of time. And he has a song where the chorus has the N-word in it. And he's singing the chorus. And I remember stood there just looking around, watching an entire crowd of white people chant it back to him. And I couldn't fucking get my head around it. I was like, this is so surreal.
Yeah.
This just wouldn't fly. This can't happen. Like, and it's just like, but if you don't have that cultural connection and understanding, like, because that's not what you grew up in, yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think it's definitely changed for the better, and that Australia was so far removed from the rest of the world that some of these things were kind of normalised when they shouldn't have been. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Because we felt so disconnected. I'm guessing.
Yeah, but there were people within the scene that were not white.
Yeah.
But they weren't the majority, I think, and that was what was just the hard thing to sort of navigate. And then especially as someone who's white myself coming in, and I come from a place of being white in a space where I'm not the majority to becoming a space where I am the majority, and then suddenly the conflict I have in myself as to how to navigate that and what I should be doing with respect to that.
Totally. And that's what it's all about. It's having respect and it's understanding. And if you are going to be involved in a culture that has come from somewhere else, you have to understand that and give something back to it and not just pinch off it like certain retail stores we might have been mentioning earlier. But you want to leave the culture in a better way that, you know.
Yeah, I think absolutely, as white people, and as divisive as this may sound, and it comes from where I came from and how I was raised and grew up in it, I do have to tread relatively carefully within a hip-hop culture that is not a white culture, you know, like, and we can argue about that, and people will probably take issue with me saying that. Some people will, because they have never had to, they've never been challenged on that. If you grow up poor in a impoverished area of Australia and you're white, you aren't less, you may think you're connected more to the hip hop scene because you can understand the struggle in this. Yeah. And this is where questions of privilege become, well, I was never privileged because I had it hard as well. But it kind of ignores the reality of what that privilege is and how the privilege applies.
Yeah. And look, it'd be awesome when we can get to a time that we don't even have to have that chat because everybody is on a level playing field, which might be some wishful thinking. But no, it's good that you sort of mentioned that. And here in Australia, we definitely had a scene that was totally different to everyone else.
Yep.
Predominantly white at that stage, but it was soon, Briggs comes along and he's very outspoken about that sort of stuff. And we've got, Trials was still part of that. So there was sort of, they just probably weren't at the forefront.
Yeah. And look, the Briggs is a pertinent part of my story too. So by this time, I'm touring with Jason Reason, and Reason always had this great legacy of putting on other artists on his show. So like he would always grabs another MC to become his hype man. So you know, he was renowned for that. Like, people in the industry knew that he gave people their head starts and a leg up. And people would always repay that favor to him, even once they were established. So we would do shows, and Checkmate might do his backups, or Fracture might do his backups, or New Sense might do his backups, and Bigfoot. You know, there was these guys who really respected him and what he did for them and what he did for the Melbourne scene, and or maybe the Australian scene as a whole, because it's probably not. It's a national scene rather than a regional scene at this point, because you've got obese artists in all states contributing together, and so eventually he puts on Briggs, and Briggs becomes his relatively regular hype man. So we're touring, and it's myself DJing, and I'm mic'd up always, and Briggs doing the backups, and Reason the headline, the main at the center of the stage. Reason's was always quite energetic, so he would lose his voice pretty quickly. So it really helped having someone else to interject and punch in, and he could just drop a line and let someone put it in, and we'd get a bit more energy in our show that way. And we had a heap of fun doing it. This is Briggs from very early on in his career, and even at that point we were like, oh, this guy's special.
He seems like a charismatic dude.
He was so charismatic, and that was what it was. It was like, he was cheeky, and he could get away with shit that none of us could get away with, just because he was so fucking lovable, and he was 100% real. He was amazing. Like, he was such a cool kid to be around and come up around, and see him at a young age and then mature and blossom and become such an important voice in not just the hip hop scene here, but in media in Australia.
Totally.
Be a very culturally relevant, unapologetic black voice that white countries struggle to deal with.
Yeah.
It's great.
Man, and he's doing some amazing stuff now.
Yeah.
My partner was watching Boy Swallows Universe the other day, and I don't really watch too much stuff, and I heard a voice. I'm like, is that Briggs? And she's like, I don't know. And then, and it was,
Yeah, so Briggs was, we knew at the time he would be something special. Reason would 100% agree with that, I'm sure. That you can see star quality. But we're touring, we're getting together. We record some music together. Funny enough, like we decide at some point that it might be worth being a group, so it doesn't have to be Reason carrying all the weight. And so we start the process of recording some material. And
you're doing production here?
No, I never moved into production, but there's links from all the people we've been working with. I was DJ 100%, so I was doing some cuts and stuff. We record a few tracks. At this point, I believe Hilltop Hoods and Certified Wise are still on Obese at this point. So this is what we talk about. We might release a split EP on Obese. I don't know how far talks got with the label on it, but it was, we'll do an EP, half us, half Crossbred Mongrels from Adelaide. Now, for those people who don't know, Crossbred, Debris from Hilltop Hoods is in Crossbred Mongrels, so that's the Obese connection there on that side as well. So we record some tracks here in Melbourne, we go to Adelaide and we do some backing, and I think there's a couple of Reason may have laid a verse here or there on a track for them. They support us here, we support them there, or the other way around, so we've kind of built this connection, and then for whatever reason, nothing happens with this music, and Hoods leave Obese and Funkles leave Obese. Like this disconnection from Certified Wise and Obese. And at this point, I believe Briggs kind of starts linking with those guys. I think he traveled around Europe with them, and that's probably the seeds of AB Original beginning, because obviously it's with Trials, and that's their story to tell 100%. But like that's for us, that's kind of ours. As we've drifted apart by this point. Not long after this, Reason's having kids and is kind of talking about stepping back then I have kids, and the same thing happens. I have kids, and I retire from DJing purely because it's trying to hold down a day job and a DJing in nightclubs and interstate and touring whilst having an infant at home or two is not really particularly fair on my wife. And
No, and that's one thing that a lot of people listening may not take into consideration, that as much as Aussie hip hop was flying then, everyone still sort of had a day job. You know what I mean? Like, it wasn't like you're touring around and you're making bulk cash. Like that was pretty much for the love.
there were a handful of people making a full-time gig out of it, but they're few and far between. Like it was a passion project, and it was cool. Like I was hanging out with some really awesome people, getting to see all of Australia. Like, I saw more of Australia from touring than I ever did. You know,
On someone else's dollar as well, which is cool. They put you up.
What I saw was the insides of venues and some dodgy motels and hotels, but it's still, I travelled, you know, like it was good, and the opportunity was there, and it was fun, and it was with some cool people. Like,
and the guys back in the UK must have been like, oh, how sick's this? They see that you get to travel around all the country, and they're like stuck in cold fucking London. You know what I mean? Yeah.
So I always maintained my connections with my people back at home. It was awesome. Had good friendships. But yeah, that Briggs is leaving, doing his thing. Then Briggs is releasing stuff. So I ended up doing some artwork for Briggs. At this point, I'm kind of pursuing my illustration and artwork for records and stuff. I've done a bit here and there, but I'm working a graphic design job here, which I hated.
Too corporate.
Yeah, too corporate. Paying the bills, it's destroying me. But I've got freelance on the side, so I'm doing illustration. I do artwork for Briggs. He does his Briggs and Friends mixtape he puts out.
Yeah, with the Oscar the Grouch and stuff. Yep.
So I do that artwork, and we contribute a track to it. So one of the tracks that we had recorded as a part of this split EP ends up on there. So that's kind of cool. I've got a DJ credit on there. My vocals are on there a little bit, and I've done the artwork for the release. Yeah. So just watching this sort of rolling and seeing Briggs momentum, which is amazing, but also, you know, getting to be a little bit of a part of that. I also do a 7-inch for him, which he releases with Ill Bill from Nonfiction, which was cool. They hit me up for artwork on that. And then they hit me up a little bit down. The AB Original happens, and they hit me up at one point to do some artwork, but just for whatever reason, it didn't happen. And then they move on with their journey. And that sees me kind of now with a couple of projects under my belt in the illustration world, and I've now stepped back from DJing altogether. That's where I'm kind of beginning to put my efforts and my emphasis on. But I'm also aware that I'm really sick of my day job. And my wife says to me, if you thought, you don't have to do this, you can do something else. Like, this doesn't have to be it. You don't have to be unhappy in your day job. Yeah.
And you've started a family at this point.
Yes.
Yeah.
And this is where I step into the tattooing world.
Somewhat mature-ish. I'm not saying you're too old, but a lot of young kids are starting tattooing very young. So I'm guessing getting into it in your 30s is, you're not the youngest person.
No, absolutely not. And so, look, I'd been getting tattooed from back when I was at university. So in the 90s, I started getting tattooed. I wasn't getting tattooed frequently, but enough to have been around and had kind of thought on numerous occasions it would be great to pursue this and actually look into it as a career, but never really took the steps.
Yep.
And then by this time, I'm like, maybe it's too late. I'm in my mid-30s. How can I...
Never too late, man.
No, so my father was made redundant when I was a teenager back in England, and he was in his 40s, and it was like, oh, he's now suddenly become unemployable.
Different times.
I know it was different times, but that always sat with me where it's like, oh, fuck, like I might be in for this forever now. Like, this is all I can do, because if I try and reskill, I'm over the hill.
Yeah, you got to think of it totally differently. I don't know what your dad was doing. It's a different time, but obviously in the creative world, there's no, you can do. Yeah, it's a different time now for people.
Yeah, absolutely, and that paid in my favor. So the hard part was obviously I've got a very young family happening, and to pursue tattooing, the process. There's no money to be made, basically.
Early days.
Yeah, but I need to be earning money because I've got a family as well. Fortunately, my wife was working. My wife's always been the main contributor to our relationship financially. Like she works and she's great with money.
Sounds like she's mega supportive in general.
Yeah, and she was, and that's where it comes down. Because for me, I was like, well, look, I'd really like to do this. I'd like to get an apprenticeship. She goes, well, get one. I'm like, we got a fucking baby, and she's like, just do it, make it work. We'll make it work.
And she knew that in the end, it's going to be better for your. You don't want to be. The last thing anyone wants is to be stuck in a job for fucking too long that they don't enjoy. And she just saw the short term, struggle will be worth the long term.
Yeah, look, she's so my wife is a social worker. She's the smartest person I know by far. Like she's smart intellectually, but also pretty street smart and aware of, there's a lot of things, certainly when it comes to things like mental health and conversations like this, that through her work she's very familiar with. So understanding that doing a job that you hate to the point, or maybe even in being in a toxic environment, is going to have repercussions at home. Like you're going to bring that home, and it's going to cause
kids will feel the ripple effects. Yeah.
So I never wanted that. I know she didn't want that. So it was a process of, okay, let's figure out how we can change your career, and let's pursue trying to get an apprenticeship. And I was very fortunate. I got an apprenticeship straight away, which doesn't happen ever, but the sun was shining on me that day, and I didn't realize at the time how fortunate I was with my apprenticeship and who was teaching me to tattoo. So that became, as I've grown as a tattooer, that has become very significant to me. Like the person that taught me, the lineage that I come from, is very, very important.
Can you break that down for us?
Yeah. So I got taught to tattoo by a tattooer by the name of Smear. Now, Smear is, I would imagine, must be pushing 70 now, but at the time, so this is 10, 11, 12 years ago, 13 years ago, maybe a bit longer. He, is in his 50s to 60s, been tattooing in Melbourne since the 80s. He's a staple of the Melbourne tattooing scene. He's a character. He's an original Melbourne punk.
Yeah, cool.
And was in the band The Depression, who released music, and they actually they supported Dead Kennedys when they came out and stuff like that. So he's just this really gnarly punk rock guy.
And geographically, where was the shop?
So he had always bounced around. By this time, we were in Blackburn, Taboo Tattoos in Blackburn. There's Andre Cleary, who owns Taboo, has a few. This was one of them, but Andre was never there. So there was other people in this studio. Smear was one of them. I walked in, managed to get on the right side of him, and talked my way into an apprenticeship with him. And it was a pretty informal apprenticeship, but it was an apprenticeship, and I wasn't abused like many apprentices. So it's almost, this is the cusp of the old school to new school apprenticeship thing happening. So it was like an old school apprenticeship, but I didn't have to do a lot of the shitty jobs.
And it's also in an interesting time for tattooing in general, because it really is about to go super mainstream. It kind of was early 2000s, tattoos sort of still kind of underground to an extent. Then they're everywhere by the late 2000s.
Yeah, so this is, like Miami Ink is on TV. So now for the first time you can actually see what it's like in a tattoo studio without walking into a tattoo studio.
The Hollywood version.
Yeah. But that was evident in the people coming into the shop that I would see, where you'd literally just have someone walk in and ask, how much for a sleeve?
That's a strange
and expect you to be able to draw it up because, on the TV show, they drew it up while they went for a lunch break or whatever. So it's this, oh no, that's not how this works. But mainstream interest in tattoos has now become really significant. So this is happening, and I'm pursuing it, and it's fucking hard. Tattooing is really hard.
Yep.
Like, and I'm a natural artist. Like, I've never struggled to pick up any medium that I've done until I started to tattoo, and I was like, oh, maybe I've bitten off more than I can chew, but I'm all in now.
When you were doing, like, obviously the graffiti is very, you know, hands-on, but when you're doing all the design stuff, obviously you're using computers and there's a lot of that sort of thing, but are you drawing and then digitizing it? Yeah, okay.
So my process has always been on paper first.
Right.
So, and I was looking the other day for something, and I went through, I found piles and piles of sketchbooks that date back 10, 15 years, and they're all just full of just sketches, and they're messy as, but that's kind of how I work. It's work, and then I'll refine. So if I'm doing my illustration work, it's all in pencil, pen, whatever, Sharpies, and then I'll take a photo of it or scan it and then work to digitize it. Tattooing, so that was relatively natural in that sense. Drawing tattoos, understanding, I was learning the history of Australian tattooing because I'm now aware that I'm being taught by someone relatively significant in that realm. And as an outsider, as an English person, I felt I needed to do my knowledge.
Yeah, do your due diligence.
Yeah, absolutely. I need.
But you're someone who understands culture and gets it and that sort of thing. So you don't want to come in as some kook. You want to actually do it and fucking pay respect.
Yeah, and I think that does stem from my hip hop upbringing.
Totally.
Whereas cultural, I don't want to appropriate. I don't want to step on toes. I don't want to upset people, and I want to treat everything with the respect it deserves. But so that was great. So I was learning to tattoo, and it was good. At the same time, I was actually doing my apprenticeship while still working my full-time job because an apprenticeship doesn't pay any money.
Yep.
And so it was just the juggle I had to do.
Which leaves very little no time at home.
Yeah, and so DJing's gone because I've definitely got no time for that. Records are sold, a bunch of records are sold. Everything else put in storage. And I'm knuckling down trying to figure out this tattooing, but also I'm doing a little bit of illustration work on the side, like some freelance work, and that's where I start drawing up just these hip hop characters. And I was just playing around with some ideas, and eventually my wife and Instagram's just started.
Yeah,
so Instagram has just started, like as I'm doing my apprenticeship, but it's very basic.
Yeah,
so. It was different to how it is now.
You put the filters on everything, and
you just took a picture and then you put a border on it, and it made it look like
a Kodak thing.
Yeah. An Instamatic picture or something like from the 70s. That's all it could do. You had no stories, you had no reels, you had nothing like that. But I was using it, and I got a following on that from my hip hop connections. So I was on there as Mark563. And so I built a following, posting up some records, posting up pictures of my kids, because that's what everyone did, and then my drawings. And eventually the ball rolls on that, and I'm not really posting my tattooing, a little bit here and there. Like, I don't think maybe I wasn't good enough to put them up yet anyway.
Yep.
And I want to respect that process a little bit.
Yeah. So did you buy a machine early days, or was it kind of like you had to go through the whole...
I went through the process.
Yeah. Which is, it's not generally, everyone's different, but a lot of people don't have to go through that process.
Yeah,
now.
there's the steps generally back in the days were either you went through the process or you started with an eBay machine or a machine you got and you fuck yourself up and then you find your way. Mine falls in the middle of that a little bit because what happens is my mentor, Smear, says to me eventually, so I guess you're my apprentice now, because I've been hanging around the studio a long time. Nothing had ever been spoken. I'm answering the phones. I'm drawing up his designs. I'm booking people in, setting up his workstation and breaking him down. I know I'm doing an apprenticeship. He knows I'm doing an apprenticeship, but we've not spoken about it.
Which is pretty old school and kind of cool.
And then, so one day he goes, I guess so. Well, I guess I can't have my apprenticeship. I can't have my apprentice not having machines. I mean, we're going to get some machines? Great. So we go and see Johnny Dollar on Punt Road, and like everyone did for their first setup. I bought my machines from John Entwistle, and my setup, and I was there. I had a setup. I was ready to go. Needles, inks, everything, machines, grips, and at that point you realise how much money goes into the tools that you need and being set up. But I had a possibility. It was there. I'd do my apprenticeship. I'm tattooing people in the studio and at Smear's place, outside the studio, and then everything falls apart. Smear rings me up on the morning that I'm supposed to go into the studio, still doing my apprenticeship, and says, yeah, don't bother coming in today. And I'm like, why not? He goes, I don't work there anymore.
Right.
I was like, oh, okay. He'd had a falling out. He'd had a disagreement with the studio.
Had this been building up?
I think so.
Yep.
Totally unbeknownst to me.
Yeah.
Says, I'm not going to tattoo there anymore. I'm going to retire. You're ready to tattoo. I'm like, okay.
Thanks.
But I don't have a studio to tattoo in now
because
I was his apprentice, not the studio apprentice. And my confidence isn't there to the point where I'm just going to walk into that studio and go, okay, so can I have a job? Because I just don't have that relationship with them. My relationship was with him.
And you probably, as respect to your apprentice, to your mentor, if he's not on good terms with them, then you can't go.
I'm not going back in that shop.
No.
This place is dead to me. I'm very black and white with that kind of shit. But I was suddenly left in the lurch. So I said, well, what the fuck do I do? Because just tattoo. So, yeah, that sounds way easier than it actually is. So I backyarded. Which...
At your own house?
Yeah.
Yep.
So at that point, I'd been tattooing people. Like I never didn't tattoo people. The whole process was learn to tattoo by tattooing people. And he said, Smear had said to me, don't practice on pig skin. You get bad habits, pigs don't move. Dead pigs don't move. You know, like learn to tattoo real people. So I did. And it got to a point where it's like, okay, well, we can supply you some customers who are my friends through the shop, but you need to start tattooing your friends now. Like, start with people who've already got tattoos and offer them shitty tattoos, basically. If they've got a lot of
guinea pigs.
If they've got shitty tattoos, if they've already got a lot of tattoos, having a couple of shitty ones, that's not going to be a problem.
Totally.
So that's what I did. So I put the feelers out and I just started tattooing. And I was working my day job, and then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Friday night, all day Saturday, all day Sunday, I was tattooing at home.
Again, that's pretty nice and supportive of your wife.
She pushed it a lot as well. So she was actually helping me get the connection. So it was like friends of hers who wanted tattoos. So
and you're using the Instagram now too?
Yeah, I don't know if I was. I was using it, but I don't think I was advertising because I still didn't feel comfortable with it. Also knowing that it's completely illegal.
What are the legalities with that sort of
thing? Yeah, it's illegal.
Amazing.
It's that simple.
That's it, yeah.
You're not allowed to do it.
Yeah.
But I had a bunch of people who became regulars and would come in, and some would trade like a 6-pack of beer, or some would bring $50.
Better than a fucking pigskin.
Absolutely. And so I tattooed for 3 years from home. I still, all this time I was like, my tattoos are okay. Some of them are...
Are you developing a style, but you're just going with whatever someone wants?
No, yes and a little bit. So when I first got into tattooing, the graffiti side of me was really into things like Mr. Cartoon and this gangster script.
Which was very popular at that time as well.
Mike Giant, all these guys who I knew from a graffiti world and from a tattoo world. So that's where I thought I was going to go with it. And then I start tattooing, and Smear is an old school Aussie. So he just teaches me traditional tattoos.
Yeah.
Like, we would call it American traditional, but they're Australian traditional.
Which will never go out of fashion, I really think.
Right.
Yeah.
I'd never really cared for them at that point, but then I got taught to tattoo them that way, and my world changed completely. I'm like, oh no, this is how tattoo should be done. This is what tattooing is. I'm taught how to. All the fundamentals are in a traditional tattoo: straight lines, clean lines, bold lines, solid color, nice shading. Everything you can. If you can do it in a traditional tattoo, you should probably be able to do every other tattoo. So that's where it starts. So that's when I suddenly start going on this journey with American traditional, where I'm like, oh, okay, I need to learn about this as well. And this pays into how I said my brain works a certain way, that I need to focus and hyper-focus on subjects, and I just jump in from both feet, and that's where I'm at. So yeah, like I'm developing a bit of a style. It's a cross between graffiti tattoos and traditional tattoos, and that's as much to do with the client base I've got, because some of them are from the hip hop world,
Yep.
and some of them from the tattoo world. So it's kind of the two are combining a little bit, but it's baby steps. And but on top of this, I'm still doing some illustration with my hip hop illustration stuff. So
Yeah, and they're bold lines, like that sort of style that you had, and with the Briggs cover, that's always been your sort of style.
yeah, I kind of developed that style. Kind of like I said, I was a character graffiti artist. That's what I was into. So doing funny characters was kind of what I enjoy drawing. My kids are born, and I'm sitting just drawing with my kids because that's what we do as parents. And especially from the perspective of someone who is an artist, it's natural to just sit and draw with my kids. So we'd have rolls of paper out, and I just remember drawing and sketching, and I'd sketched a couple of characters in a style slightly different to how I'd normally do, and that was the beginnings of the style I would then adapt for my hip-hop illustration.
Yep.
And I was like, oh, cool, that looks kind of cool. It's kind of a bit funky. I like it. It's cool. Let's see where I can go with this. And so at this time, I then draw up a handful of designs, which my wife then tells me, my wife again, says, why don't you make stickers out of them?
Yep.
And it was this idea of like, well, I'm a hip-hop nerd, and she, when it comes to birthdays and Christmases, is always looking for weird, kooky things that she can buy me to do with hip-hop that I will appreciate. So this was for her, like, if you make stickers out of this is the type of shit I would be buying for you for Christmas. Yep. There's going to be people out there who are going to want to buy them.
Yeah.
There'll be girlfriends and partners out there who want to buy them for them, or there'll be people who want to collect them because you're a fucking idiot collector and you can't, you're a hoarder. Yeah. So you need all of it. You throw nothing away. So that's where that came from. So concurrently, I've got my tattooing happening as a side affair, my illustration happening as a side affair, and then my day job, and being a parent.
But the day job's got to be sort of wrapping up soon because you're tattooing a lot. That's got to look like you can almost go full time into that.
My concern with that is taking that step from backyard. How do I step from backyard into a studio? Studio is not going to touch me as a backyarder. Excuse me.
So the transition is got to be
like how do I make that step? Because if I go to a tattoo studio and say, hey, do you have a job? Yeah, sure. How long have you been tattooing? And I say 3 years, and they say, where have you been tattooing? Oh, in my
You
dining
can't
room.
leverage off Smear's name at this stage.
No. I possibly could have, but I didn't have the confidence in myself at the time. So this is a self-confidence
Part
issue.
of the journey.
Yep. What happens is, interestingly enough, one of my regulars is a friend of ours, Cassie, who's a good friend of our family. I'm tattooing her heaps. She's got tattoos, and then says, oh, you tattooing? Cool, let's get tattooed. She's just come. We're seeing her every weekend. We're socializing with her, and I'm tattooing her. She went away she's into soccer. I'm into soccer, being English. And we go and watch soccer together at this time. She goes on a tour following the Socceroos on the camp, and meets someone on the camp who's covered in tattoos, who says, hey, I like your tattoos. Who did your tattoos? And she goes, oh, my friend Mark. He tattoos them. This guy, Mikey, goes, well, I own a tattoo studio in Melbourne. She sends me a message. I'm going to get you, I'm making it my mission to get you a job tattooing full time. I've met a guy, Mikey. He owns a tattoo studio. He likes your work. He's seen it all over me. And she's covered by me at this point.
Yeah.
So I was like, awesome, that's amazing. A couple of months go by, nothing really happens, and then I get a message from him saying, hey, Cassie's you're giving me your number. I've got a spot coming up in my studio. Do you want to come in for an interview? And so all my Christmases come up. Well, I win the lottery. Great. I go and do an interview. I'm honest with him about my tattooing. He doesn't care. So I'd seen your tattoos. They're fine.
He knows the backstory a little bit as well, I'm guessing. Yeah.
Yeah. He's like, I've seen your work. Your work's good. I interviewed well. We got on. It was fine. And the fact that I'm probably 15 years older than most people coming in.
You got a mature mindset.
I think he kind of sees me as, oh, well, look, you're not going to fuck me around. Like, you've got a work ethic in this. So he says, oh, when can you start? And I was like, oh, fuck, well, I've got to quit my job. And he's like, all right, well, give him notice. And I said, yeah, but look, I've been there for 8 years. He says, I'll give him a month's notice and start on this date. I was like, you'll hold me the job for me? But yeah, awesome. That was my major concern was I was going to go and give my notice in at work.
Yeah.
And then sometime between then and the month of me starting, he goes, actually, no, you don't have the job.
Yeah.
Like, 'cause there's no contracts in any of this.
Yeah.
Like, I was just like,
And it's different because each tattoo studio works differently as well. Like I'm guessing with that, he's hiring you for the job. You're like, there's a base wage or something. I don't know. They're all work differently.
Yeah,
I'm presuming.
There's no wage.
It's
cut.
just yeah.
So at this point, it's like, okay, we'll come in, work, and you'll take a percentage of the tattoo you do. If you don't work, you don't get paid. If you don't do a tattoo, you don't get paid.
Yep.
And look, it was cool. I got my first gig full-time working in a tattoo shop. I was stoked on it. We weren't the busiest studio, but there was work coming in and out. So I was starting to tattoo.
So mostly like walk-ins or people just calling up the shop? Like, are you advertising your own stuff now?
I'm advertising, so I've got a little bit of my clients. I'm picking up clients in the shop. The shop, the way the shop worked, like Mikey, who owned it, wasn't a tattooer, and it was his second business. He had another business that was earning him money, and like the tattoo shop was just kind of like his hangout. It was like, it's a fucking cool place to be.
Yep.
He's covered in tattoos. He loves tattoos. Let's just buy a shop, kind of thing. So he took over a shop, and then he had connections instantly. And so my first week I tattooed in that shop. I started work on a Tuesday. The Friday was the tattoo convention, and I was expected to be doing it.
Shit.
So I did Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, then Friday, Saturday, Sunday, worked in a convention at the Melbourne Tattoo Convention.
Yeah.
My first week tattooing. And not only that, he had flown over international artists from the US to work on our booth.
Wow.
So I'm doing my first week of tattooing next to 3 very significant US tattooers who I'm a fan of. I'm just fucking panicking. Don't look at what I'm doing. Like,
yeah.
But I was just thrown in at the deep end. It was awesome.
Yeah. And I'm guessing you can learn a bit from them.
Yes. Sadly, 2 of them have since passed. That's so it was Norm Will Rise, and Boog Star, who are both from the US, who were script masters, and both have sadly passed away. And there was a guy called Edgar who was there as well, who I'm still in contact with. He's in, I think he's got a shop in Vegas now. But these guys were, like the script kings come over from the US, and they were just hustlers as well. So I kind of got to be around those guys. And I learned a few things from them in that very compact week that I was with them.
Yeah, man, it's an awesome way to just to kick off your actual shop proper, standalone experience.
Thrown in right at the deep end alongside legends.
Well, there you go.
And it was amazing. So I have my wife being really supportive, saying, yeah, but we can do this. I might not be earning much money at this stage. I'm certainly not earning my graphic design career wage, but I'm happier. I think our balance at home is better. Hopefully she's happy that I'm contributing, if not financially, to the relationship, emotionally and physically, with the labor of what goes on in the home life with kids. My kids are growing up, and it's awesome. Like these steps that I'm now into this new career. But concurrently with this, I still have my illustration work going on.
Yeah.
And that's when that suddenly takes off.
Because you're posting online, and then So Instagram, now everyone takes it for granted, but really there wasn't a way to share photos like that ever. You know what I mean? It just didn't really exist until that came along.
Well, Instagram and social media and the internet completely killed paper press, like magazines.
Yep.
So now from a tattooist perspective, tattoo magazines don't need to exist because everything is instantly available on Instagram. That's your portfolio.
Yep.
And then my artwork side, so the illustration work. I had done these illustrations, made some stickers, was selling them, just here and there, mostly through my own website, through my own Big Cartel.
Yeah.
But out of the blue, I get contacted by a publisher called Document Press, based in Sweden, who, as I told you before, when I heard of them, I wasn't sure of who they were until I then went and looked through their catalogue and realised I owned a bunch of their books already. Yeah. So I knew they were the real deal.
What were the books? Can you think of any of them off the top?
There's a couple of graffiti books, and there's a Shirt Kings book, the Phase Shirt King books about the 1980s aerosol art sort of hip hop t-shirts they were doing. Yep. Like there was just a whole heap of stuff that I was
just cool culture stuff.
Yeah, stuff I was just familiar with. So I was like, oh wow, like these guys have contacted me and they've seen my illustrations and they have approached me about making a colouring book, which seemed like a really good idea. I was like, well, that's amazing. Like it's something that at the time I thought, if they hadn't have contacted me about it, maybe I would have thought about it myself eventually.
Yep.
But the cost involved to do it and do it myself just doesn't make it very feasible.
Totally. And it's like shooting fish in a barrel, though, when you talk about somebody who loves print to say, do you want to, do you know what I mean? Like anyone who's interested in that, anyone who's collected records or magazines, to think of making your own one is like a dream.
Yeah. It was. So they hit me up and they said, we want you to do this hip hop colouring book. We love the designs we've seen of yours. The plan will be however many pages, and it was like, I can't remember if it was 40 or 50 pages. And at that time, I literally had 4 illustrations.
Do you remember who the 4 were?
Yeah, so it was Eazy-E, Big Daddy Kane, Slick Rick, and LL Cool J. I'd drawn.
So we're talking that you started chronologically, though.
Yeah, the idea was always kind of to do it chronologically, and then I realised I'd missed a step, and so I kind of filled back in. But they were like, yeah, so we need you to do 50 illustrations. I've got 4. Mm-hmm. And they take a little bit of time to do, you know, and especially to do them well. I was like, holy shit, how am I going to do this?
At least they're only asking for black and white, though. Like you're not.
That was the big benefit, was that I didn't have to fully render them. So I was working in Illustrator, so I draw a sketch, rough it out, take a picture of it or scan it, take it into Illustrator, and then create vectors of it to make it all smooth and cool. And I just have a very strict process on how I like to work, but it's a labour of love because it takes a lot of time.
Yep.
You know,
I'm guessing you've got the pen tool down.
Yeah. Well, funnily enough, no. It's all click of a mouse.
Really?
Yeah. I don't have I didn't have the Wacom or anything like that for my Mac. I do everything by hand with a mouse. Click, 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 click. You know. This is pre-Procreate as well. Yeah. So.
Have you migrated over to Procreate now?
I use Procreate in my day job of tattooing and also for my illustrations, but I still vectorize everything by hand.
Yeah. So. I asked somebody the other day for something and they said, oh, you can't create vectors within Procreate. And I'm like, oh, that sounds odd. Maybe,
it's raster. So
you've got to bounce it out.
Now, what you can do is you can do a high resolution JPEG or PNG file, export it,
live trace it,
and then live trace it. But it's not good. It's not clean.
Really.
It's never. No. I'm so meticulous and specific about how I want it to look that I'm just like, oh, I could do that and it would take me 20 minutes, or I could spend 12 hours doing it and it would be great. So I'll go the 12-hour route. And I still do that, like, because people hit me up for commissions all the time, and I'm like, yeah, I'll do a commission for you. How much do you want to, you know? And I totally undervalue them because they don't realize how much work goes into it. But if I was to bill them by the hour, they're never going to pay for it.
Yeah, that's true. You're a perfectionist.
Yeah, but that's the struggle of being any artist, I think.
Totally. So then you've got to come up with another 46 hip hop artists. Was there? So you're thinking? Did you work through them chronologically? You just had a checklist and you just ticked them off?
Yeah. So Bjorn, my liaison at the publishers, he and I discussed who we would do, worked it out, tried to. We shortlisted all the people we thought should go in it, and then in the first colouring book we did, they're all printed and they're in page order of chronology, like, so it's a timeline of old to new. But yeah, we literally had a list, and I had to just work through them and draw them and make sure that the publisher was happy with them. So, is this any good? Is this drawing? Does this look like it's supposed to look like? So there was that process. Then we had to go and had to do our due diligence to make sure that we got approval for them to be in the book. So,
Somewhat approval, I'm
yeah,
guessing.
as I said to you before we were on mic, we reached out to every single person we illustrated to get approval. And as you see, if you look on the back of the book, there's some quotes from those people as well. So what we did, we reached out and said, hey, I'm working on a colouring book. We want to feature an illustration of you. Here's the illustration we want to feature of you.
So yeah, I showed them. Yeah, cool.
Here is an example of some we've done already. And then I would give them a couple of other pages just so they had an idea of what the book was like. And do you object? Do you mind? And if you don't mind, would you consider giving us a quote for the book? We heard back from a good chunk of the people involved in it. And like I said to you before, we had a couple knockback, but that was for whatever reasons, and we were fine, that's okay. The people who we didn't hear back from, there is a disclaimer in the book, and it says, I believe at the start, that if for future print runs, if you don't want to be included, let us know and we'll remove you.
Yep. I think from the collective point of view, most individuals would be flattered that they're in this book, which is essentially like your top 50 greatest hip-hop artists of all time. But what a lot of them would be scared of to be their management and stuff and be like, okay, what happens when these guys on the other side of the world decide to print T-shirts with your face on it? That's where it becomes a bit of a,
Yeah, look, I think there is an element of that. So a lot of these guys, there's a mix of very famous hip-hop artists that are still active who there's no way of reaching, but I will reach a contact of theirs.
Try your best.
Yeah. So I might get Eminem's marketing team or something, but I'm not speaking to Eminem. Mm-hmm. But then there's people who I'm speaking directly to as artists because they're not, they're significant, but they're not on that level. So even MC Search, who from Third Base, I did an illustration of him, and I sent out some feelers and I got in contact. I ended up being in contact, not with him, but with someone in his management team, I believe, who then also put me in contact with him. So like I was liaising at some point directly with MC Search, and then now Instagram has changed so that you can actually talk directly with these artists. Yep. But even the guys from Souls of Mischief, I talked to those guys almost directly. And some were like, hey, that's awesome, this is great. You know, I think for the most part, people liked that they were being celebrated.
Yeah, for sure.
There wasn't this idea that they needed to be remunerated for it. Like it was like, I don't think anyone ever really thought of it as like, oh, he's cashing in on their.
Yeah, but I get it could be taken that way, definitely. Yeah, sure. You know, and when you're in a copyright thing with someone's likeness and using their name on a page, but then it also puts into another thing, like these people are out there, they're almost public domain to an extent.
And illustration and caricature and cartoons are not, they don't own the copyright to my drawing of them. Like if I copied a photograph, it's a different story because even the artist doesn't have the copyright on that. It is the photographer. Yep. So like I did as my part for my graphic design degree, I had to learn about design in the law and art within the law and copyright. So I have an understanding of what I'm allowed to do and what I'm not allowed to do. Now, obviously, if I design someone and they're maybe wearing a WuTang t-shirt in the picture, there may be some brand issues with that. Yeah. But that's down to the discretion, isn't it, right?
Yeah, and I think we're in an interesting time now. Like, I think, you know, Mickey Mouse's old likeness is now in the public domain, which is, like, crazy to think of.
So Steamboat Willie became public domain, like 2 weeks ago or something stupid.
Crazy, isn't it, to think
that? And so now everyone's doing their own take on it. And it's funny, but, like, I mean, honestly, with stuff like a caricature is... it's a grey area for copyright because they don't own their likeness. They don't own sort of. Does that make sense?
No, I totally get it, and I think that like you think of someone like say the image of Biggie would have been replicated on that many different T-shirts and posters and things that don't have any permission, but that's just going to happen and you can't stop it.
Yeah, and in that world, there's so many people who are exploiting his likeness for their own financial gain, directly stealing other people's photographs. That has surely got to take priority to be prosecuted against than some guy who's drawn a caricature of him and hasn't thrown him any money for it.
Yeah, have not just directly ripped you off, but I'm sure it's happened. But have people sort of emulated that idea and sort of tried to bite that?
Yes, Amazon is a really weird place if ever you choose to explore it.
It is. It's a bit like the Wild West, isn't it? Like there's a lot of sort of untoward shit going on for such a big company.
Yeah, I got over it real quickly. Occasionally I would get an email from my publisher and they'd be like, not to worry you, but there's this book out there and it's self-published by someone set up an Amazon account, self-published, which you can do. Anyone can put anything on Amazon. And it's hip-hop coloring book and it's stolen like 3 of my images and then they're saying it's for sale because they've used the images that I had up for sale, but then they've maybe redone the graphics slightly. I'm like, oh, so it's like the bootleg hip-hop coloring book? I'm like, yeah. Like, okay, they go, don't worry about it though because it will get taken down and even if it doesn't, it's not impacting your sales. It's a bit shit, but okay. And then there was someone did a book, I think it was a Dutch hip-hop coloring book. And for a second, I was kind of a little bit like, oh, they've kind of ripped me off completely because it was designed kind of almost exactly how mine was, the page layout exactly the same, and even the back cover with the quotes. But ultimately, like, I mean, like, if someone... Imitation is the sincerest form of flattery or whatever you want to say. Like, fuck it.
It's a culture built on sampling.
Yeah, right. Like, so I can't be too upset. In the moment, you're just like, oh man, like, can't you do something original? But like, then I'm like, oh, well, if it inspired it, that's kind of cool. Like, I don't have enough energy to be upset or angry about people stealing my shit.
No, what you do is you go and make another one. So then you did the hip hop, you did the East Coast one, you did the West Coast one, you know.
So well, the amazing thing with that is, 2016, the first one comes out. I think they did a 4,000 print run, and they said we'll just keep you up to date with royalties and represses and stuff like that. And it's just rolled over and rolled over and rolled over. And I know that book has been reprinted a considerable amount of times.
Yeah, awesome.
I know it sells well. I know it's for sale in lots of museum shops and things like that. Like so, awesome. And it's in the graffiti museum and things like that. Like so, I can't underestimate. You can never underestimate the reach that book had. It was amazing. Like it was like financially from my end. It was never about the money. Like, and I knew that the amount of work I put into it, I'm never going to get paid an hourly wage on, but to get a royalty check every once in a while from it is fucking amazing.
Passive income.
Yeah, absolutely. So I was at a time where I wasn't particularly busy in my tattooing when I could do it. So I got time to put it out. I'm still learning to tattoo, or still tattooing, early career tattooing. Then I release it. I concentrate a bit more on my tattooing. I've got a few other projects here, still doing my stickers. COVID comes around. Just before COVID, the publishers hit me up and said, hey, let's do some more. Why don't we do an East Coast, West Coast? One East Coast, one West Coast. I was like, that's great. But I was worried about, again, having the time to do the work. Fortunately, COVID happened. Said no one ever.
It afforded you the time.
Yeah, COVID was great for me. Like, I was able to spend time with my family, time that I couldn't have otherwise. My wife was still working. I got JobKeeper because I was a tattooer, like because I'm a business and I pay my taxes, so I'm good. And I could also spend time doing the book. And I think it was the books, and then the puzzle happened. It was just this great knock on, and then it's just sort of snowballed in terms of a project after a project after a project. and now my work is out there in the public, and
Yep.
some people are familiar with who I am for what I do.
Fucking oath, man. That's awesome. And I'm guessing you're getting some of the actual artists sharing the images that you've done of them, like on socials or whatever.
Yeah, and that happened quite early on. I remember someone from Ice Cube's social media shared my illustration of him. Then Public Enemy shared my illustration. I've had Diamond D shared it, and Nine, and sort of these guys who I'm real big fans of their music. Like this, it gave me an opportunity to suddenly be on a level where I can communicate one-to-one with some of my heroes.
Are they tagging you? Or sometimes
yes,
yes,
for the most part, yeah. So my publishers play a great role in this, because my publishers also reach out, and they have the clout by being the fact that they're this publishing house, not just some random guy in Australia. They're a publishing house with a reputation, with a back catalogue, and so they have contacts. But they will often send stuff to. I think we sent a book to everyone who featured in it.
Amazing.
Like, it was like, hey, like, as a thank you, give us your address and we'll post it out to you. And then they might post a picture of themselves with the book, or post just the page of the illustration. And it's just every time it's like, well, this is promotion for me.
Yeah.
And if I can turn that into more work in my illustration work, or if I can turn it into something in my tattooing world and cross the streams, this is great. Like,
yeah.
Because
and that must be a thing. It's opened up doors, because I know, and I hit you up. I want to get some of the characters that you've got tattooed on me, and I guess that's pretty cool. You've almost got a flash sheet in a fucking colouring book.
Yeah, there's a part of my wife, I'm sure, would love me to be doing just my hip hop illustration tattoos as a career. Like I think she's really into that.
That's a tall order.
Yeah, I think it's a bit much to be completely focused on that. But I've got clients who get them. And I fucking love those clients for choosing my work. I got one client who picked one or two illustrations out of my book, and then asked me to do illustrations that I hadn't done for a tattoo. Like, so he wanted some characters that I hadn't featured in the books, which I was more than happy to do. So now he's kind of got like these one-off tattoos.
But the hourly rate, man.
Yeah, nah, man. I can't bill it. But it's a labour of love. Like, and especially for clients like that who are good repeat customers who have spent good money with me already, and I'll look after them as much as I can, because I'm finally in a career that I would do for free if I could afford to do it, so.
Yeah, you're living your passion project.
Yeah, and having worked a shitty job for as long as I did, you can really appreciate that so much more. And a lot of artists feel that way, I think, where it's like, I'm fortunate that my wife is very good financially. Like, she's good with money and can kind of get us sorted, that I don't have to worry so much about it. Like, I've got to contribute financially and bring in a wage, but that's never, like, I think my brain kind of doesn't focus that as being the most important thing.
The
it's
art
like,
comes first.
Yeah, right? Like, which sounds so fucking romantic.
Yeah.
And isn't always practical. But I've found myself in a position where I'm actually quite busy tattooing and loving everything. The money's coming in and the work's coming in. So.
Yeah. And don't sell yourself short, man. You've worked on this for a long time. It's not like it just happened overnight. You've been fucking working on it for decades. You know what I mean?
Yeah, but
in a roundabout way.
Yeah, absolutely, I have. But artists are often their biggest critics and quite hard on themselves, and I think I fall into that. Experience, confidence issues, being critical of the work you're doing. Is it good enough? Always like, and then especially if you're suddenly finding yourself commercially surviving off of it. You're a commercial artist now, so the work I have to do, people have to like it.
Yeah, but as long as you're happy with it, that's all that matters. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and people are getting these characters tattooed on them, then they fucking like them enough,
Yeah, and it's cool. Like, and I've got, like I said, I have a number of clients who are picking them. I'd like to do a few more. Like, they're always there. So if anyone ever wants them, they just have to hit me up.
Yeah, I've got a couple I want to do.
Yeah.
Is it interesting? Like, do people send you photos of how they've coloured in the books and stuff?
Yes.
Like, you see different, yeah?
Yeah.
Tell us about that. That's kind of cool.
Yeah, that's the one that I'll get it in my DMs all the time, and it's from people all over the world, which is the best part. Like, it's a lot of time in America. I think they're big sellers in America, but I'll get a DM and I'll sort of say, oh, there's some DM in it. So I've just been tagged in a story basically, and it's either someone who's doing my puzzle or has coloured in a book, or I got this as a birthday present. This is the best birthday present I've ever got. It's so great. And then them colouring it in. There was one guy who was on his Instagram was put all the numbers of pages on bits of paper and then pulling them out on like a live.
Oh, yeah.
And
then going live.
All right, page 27. Right now we're doing this, and coloured it in and tagged me in it. It was really cool. Like,
Awesome.
Yeah.
How would you suggest people colour them in? With like actual coloured markers or with pencils, or whatever you feel like?
Yeah, look, I don't how precious are you? You know, like pencils is great, always good. But, markers will work to some extent, but there's like we've tried to put it on it. Certainly the second and third, the East and West Coast, they were done on a certain paper that shouldn't have bleed through. Yeah. But I was always that kind of person that doesn't want to ruin anything. Like
it's hard. Like when you gave them to me before, man, I'm like, oh, I want to colour them in with my son, but also I don't want to ruin them. So yeah, but it is kind of cool because obviously growing up, we all had colouring books. Yeah. So and they were always on shitty paper. Yeah. So it's kind of like a homage to that. You know, you don't want it to be too nice stock.
But it's cool, like, because that weird realm of adult colouring books becoming a thing just around the time that we started work on it. So conceptually, even when they hit me up about it, I was like, colouring book? Is this for kids? Like, and then it's definitely not just for kids. Like, and some of the illustrations are probably in the first book certainly made a bit borderline as to whether they're children friendly.
Yep.
But like
discretion to be advised.
Yeah, I think there's an illustration of Eminem in there, and he's flipping the bird. So KRS-One holding an Uzi.
That's nothing by today's standards. So have you got more in the works?
No, at the moment we've not really discussed much. Fortunately, I've been in this sort of. We did the colouring books, we did the puzzle, we did a journal, which was called like Day Planner, and it's got hip hop facts on it, which was pretty cool. That was fun to do. I don't think it was a big seller, but it was fun to do. Stickers I'm pushing. Like I did a release of stickers before Christmas. I'll probably try and do one in the next few months.
Is there an artist that you haven't done that people keep going, man, why haven't you done this guy, or why haven't you done this chick, or whatever?
Yeah.
Who do they want? Who do people want? There's
a few guys in Adelaide that keep hitting me up for a Schoolie D.
Schoolie D was big in the
And I'm kind of like, I probably should, but it's finding like sort of the right image of him to work from. Like
that's the thing. The image has to be iconic enough for somebody with just a solid line to see. Oh yeah, that's so and so. You can't just put a chain on everybody.
Yeah, it's so, and which is kind of how it started, where they were a little bit abstract and weren't quite perfect renditions of who they were supposed to be. And then as the project has evolved, I'm trying to make them look exactly like, a caricature of that person, but then not ripping off a photo of them, because then I'm stealing someone else's copyright. So it's like, no, the picture, it can kind of be this, it can kind of be that. And so oftentimes I try and find a bit more of an obscure picture of them, but I want everything to be right. They must be wearing the right sneakers that they would have been wearing, or the right type of Timberland boots that they were wearing in that era. The jeans must be the right type of set. But the attention to detail that I try and put in is really meticulous.
And now with everybody, but a lot of rappers as well, being heavily tattooed as well, then that adds another fucking layer of complication to it.
So look at the Rick Ross illustration in there, and you'll see he's covered in all his tattoos, and they're pretty much his tattoos.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it's the work you have to do to kind of the scrutiny that I put myself under, and I probably don't have to, but it's just the way my brain works.
Oh, like I said before, you're a perfectionist. What about an Aussie version?
Yeah, so this has come up, and I have done some work with some Aussies on stuff that for whatever reason didn't happen and didn't come out. Ooh. And I think, with all due respect to everyone in the Australian scene, I think there's a few egos that probably didn't want to handle it. I think a lot of some of the Australian hip hop scene takes itself quite seriously, and what I do may be considered mocking it a little bit. Like it may be a bit.
Yeah.
I say this because I have experienced it just without naming names. It was cool. Briggs embraced me doing an illustration of him, and it was awesome. You know, like, but Briggs is quite a distinct looking character in anyway. So to illustrate him was very easy. Like he's just a really noticeable person.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Australian hip hop artists kind of all look the same. Like I think I look like all of them. Like this is look, another bald head and fucking goatee and.
But therein lies the challenge. No, but it is. I know exactly what you're saying. You need a very distinctive feature to point out about that person, and that would make it hard.
And I think there's so much interpersonal beef within the Australian scene that I could only imagine the conflict of, I don't want to be in the same book as this prick. And why am I on the opposite page to that cunt? Like, you know, it's that, because that shit happens and people are fucking sensitive about that shit.
I've found out doing this. I didn't really know before, but I've found out. And I guess it is a little bit divided. And hopefully one day people can bury all those hatchets and fucking move on to a big fucking benefit gig or something.
Yeah, I would hope so, just with age and maturity. Like,
so?
well, fuck, man, I'm pushing 50. Like, I couldn't imagine being in beefs with people and really taking that shit seriously anymore. Like, there's a time and place to bury a hatchet over music beef, I guess. Like, it's wild. But yeah, the Aussie scene, it was floated for a while, and it didn't. And then I think the reality of what people would expect from it and the interpersonal relationship sides of it made it a little bit too complex.
Maybe one day.
Yeah, we'd never say never.
Yeah. Talking about the state of music now, thinking about the state of the UK hip hop scene, like it's probably 20 years ago when you left, you probably couldn't imagine the kind of success that they would see right now.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's funny because the current UK hip hop scene is probably more derivative from the grime scene than it was from the hip hop scene back in the day.
But grime in turn was derivative from hip hop. You know what I mean?
Not really.
You don't think so?
No, it came up out of the garage scene.
Yeah, but
it was so different at the time. Like, so when it happened, yes and no. So when grime happened, there's a very distinctive split between UK hip hop fans and grime fans.
Yeah,
it occupied two completely different places,
and they couldn't cross over.
They kind of, as the years went by, they started to semi-crossover and kind of did, and maybe they have now. But people talk about, there's people from my generation who will talk about UK hip hop from the birth of UK hip hop in the 80s and through the 90s into the 2000s. And then there are people from the current generation of UK hip hop who will say it kind of all started with Dizzy Rascal. So like it's that they forget that there was a scene before that was its own thing and put in a lot of work. In the same way the Australian scene. Like, man, they've got all these new Australian artists who maybe don't realise the amount of work that my generation Australians and they're a little bit older than me put in. The Death Wish casts, the Pac D's, the Reasons, the Rise and Tarky, aka Brother, Deadly, all of these really important earlier Australian pioneers. How many of the current breed of Australian drill rappers really know who those guys are or appreciate what they did for the music to be on the platform it has gotten to now?
Yeah. When I had the two dudes from Mindsnare on, Nigel and Maunder, and they're totally different, genre of music, but Nigel summed it up really well. He said like the 2000s was the first generation to not look back. They just looked forward, which is a great way of putting it because it does mean that things will change and but they didn't kind of care about what went before them. And it's an interesting way to look at it. You wouldn't have progress without that sort of thing, but yeah.
That is true. And it's very hard there's no expectation for younger people to have to go back to look at what came before them because it may feel very foreign to them. But as older people, we'll feel an amount of slight or feeling jaded by these new people because they're not acknowledging or caring for a scene that existed before them that allowed them to get to this point. Because if it wasn't for the early scene, they would have to be the early scene. So they would, they wouldn't be as successful as they are because they'd have to do the groundwork to build the scene.
Yeah, no, it's totally right. I agree that everyone should, in whichever industry passion you follow, you should understand where it comes from.
Yeah.
But I think that there is something that's kind of like a naivety, like for people that don't look back because they can't be influenced because they're only looking forward. Which is kind of, I can understand that side.
But
of it
it's good because then they're not bound by the restrictions of what the preconceptions and those restrictions of that culture or that music.
That's how you get new genres and shit.
Yeah, absolutely. And then so then you're going to have older people who go, well, that's not real.
Yeah.
Because that's different. And they don't pay it. But it's happened steadily over the years. I think into the 90s, we still paid respect to the 80s pioneers. Into the early 2000s, we still paid respect to the early 80s and 70s pioneers. And then suddenly, somewhere along the line, in the mid-2000s to 2010 era, people stopped caring about old shit. Like it's like new fans stopped caring about the old shit.
I think you can probably find that probably came along with the Spotify sort of era where you can curate playlists to what you like. When everybody that, you had to dig more, you listen to your parents' music, you listen to your cousin's music, whatever.
Yeah, well, it was gatekept by record labels, radio stations,
the dudes that worked at the record store.
Those pricks. Yeah. And the media. It was gatekept, so you didn't have it. If you had to, you could go and dig it out, but they had to accept it and allow it to be out there. Now anyone can make any music in their bedroom on the cheapest of equipment and upload it to Bandcamp or SoundCloud or Spotify and TikTok and suddenly have a hit.
Yeah. But then and that's great and it's awesome and I'm sure some great artists come out of that. But people that put in the work and steadily do it, that's how you build longevity.
Absolutely.
Sure, if you just chuck a song out there and it blows up, you get a TikTok hit, but you might be fucking one and done,
Yeah, look at the Island Boys.
Yeah.
I mean, like, fuck, man, like just one crazy, stupid track that's terrible anyway, but it's TikTok viral, and now those guys are just fucking, they're done, right?
Yeah, I think the reason that they became so popular was because everybody emulated them. So that's almost now that's something that people will try and go for that virality. If we do something so stupid and people copy us, then we're in turn getting the fame out of it.
Yeah, sure.
But where's the longevity?
It's become a quick millionaire and then get done, and hopefully invest it correctly and don't just spend it on tattoos and grills.
Man, we've spoken for 3 hours.
Yeah, okay.
I don't know if there's anything else to talk about, but I'm having a great chat. I want to keep talking, but we might try and wrap it up. Do you want to let people know where they can get a tattoo from you or how they could go about getting your book or any of your products that we might have spoken about?
Absolutely. So I tattoo 5 days a week at Tattoo Connection in Wantirna South, which is a awesome tattoo studio. It's been there since 1995. So the legacy of the studio is great. Big shout out to Scotty and Nick who own the studio. That's a great place. I love working there. So come and see me there. You can always DM me I take appointments through DM. So check out my Instagram. That's the best way. My books, online available everywhere basically. So my distributor and my publisher and distributors are great. They handle it all. But if you want to support local, hit up Frankie at Union Heights. Frankie has always been a long supporter. I did my book launch at Union Heights. Big shout out to Frankie and his family. They've been great. So check there. He also sells my stickers. I sell my stickers as well, which you can find through my Instagram. And yeah, otherwise you can, if you just type into search engine, you'll find them at all reputable bookstores too.
Man, thanks so much for the books. I can't wait to
destroy them.
Well, to wrestle with the fact whether or not I'm going to colour them in. And thanks for the puzzle. Man, we've just clocked over 3 hours. This is now the longest episode we've ever done, but I feel like there's more that we could talk about, so I'd be rapt if you came back again.
Yeah, we'd do another time. There's definitely things we could talk about that we haven't touched on.
I know, man. I feel bad. Like, maybe we should. But look, let's wrap it up for now.
Awesome.
Thanks for coming, dude. I appreciate it, and I look forward to getting a tattoo off you soon.
Yeah, wonderful. Thanks for having me.
Cheers.
3,000.